Chapter 1285. Shishi received a very warm welcome at the table of the diplomatic staff. Not only Sister Kai, but the uncles and aunties were all smiling and fighting to hug her and Tong Tong. Sister Kai was still laughing behind them. Hey you guys. How can you hug people without washing your hands when making dumplings? What if you dirty their clothes? In the end, because little Momo was too small, he was carried up by an enthusiastic auntie. Someone gave him 2 candies, and the little guy chewed one in his mouth and held the other in his little hand in front of him. He comfortably watched his sister being carried by those uncles and aunts to make dumplings. This is how we make dumplings. Look, we take a piece of dough, spread it out, and then put some meat on it. Then we pinch it with our fingers and the dumplings are ready. Big sister Xiao Kai taught Shishi, but she was clearly a rookie. Not only was the way she made dumplings, but the dumplings she made were so ugly that people couldn't bear to look at them. At first, Shishi listened patiently and watched curiously. However, when Sister Kai was done, the little girl tilted her head in confusion and pouted. That's not right. Sister Kai, my papa doesn't make dumplings like this. My papa told me to make dumplings like this. The little girl gestured with her 2 small hands as if she was doing a real show. She was very serious about making dumplings for Sister Kai to see. Seeing Shishi's serious explanation, the uncles and aunties next to them all laughed. Xiao Kai, you've been taught a lesson by a child. You want to teach her with your mediocre skills? Big Sister Kai, who didn't feel the slightest bit ashamed of misleading others, ignored the teasing laughter. She asked Cece in surprise, Cece, you know how to make dumplings? This sentence could be understood in another way. If Shishi had only seen her father make dumplings, then Sister Kai would probably continue to encourage Shishi to teach her the simple way to make dumplings. However, Sister Kai was destined to be disappointed. Shishi nodded seriously and said, Yes, I know how to make dumplings. Sister Kai, let me tell you, we also know how to make dumplings at home. Xian and I both love eating the dumplings made by Papa. Then, Papa said that you should pack a few as well. Later, let's see if you can find them. The little girl even imitated her father's tone of voice, which instantly made these old uncles and aunties extremely adorable. The more Shishi talked, the more excited she became. She talked about how she and her friends designed their own dumplings, as if she was telling a story. She also talked about how her brother only liked to eat the fillings when he ate dumplings, but was afraid of being scalded. Accompanied by the little girl's story, the table was filled with laughter. Unknowingly, they had made a lot of dumplings. Of course, Shishi also made a few. But it was a pity that the little girl didn't look as good. She was just a little better than Sister Kai. At noon, the ambassador who had just gone out, Gao Yi, the minister who had gone to pick up Yang Yi, and several leaders of the embassy walked in with a few foreigners. They smiled and said, Let's welcome Mr. Smith, the ambassador of Canada to France, and Mr. Williams, the ambassador of New Zealand to France. After all, it was a diplomatic institution, and it was normal to invite ambassadors from other countries to celebrate the Spring Festival. This had nothing to do with Yang Yi, because it was not his turn to help greet the guests. However, when the dumplings were in the pot, there were fewer people around Yang Yi and Murphy. Gao Yi walked over and whispered to Yang Yi, Just now there was news from France that their president is signing a document. It is estimated that the restrictions will be lifted tomorrow. If you are in a hurry to go back home, I will arrange the earliest flight for you. Obviously, due to the pressure of public opinion and the frequent pressure from the embassies of many countries, the French police had to give in. Moreover, they didn't want to lose face. The reason why Gao Yi took care of Yang Yi so much was not only because of Yang Yi's special identity, but also because someone in China said hello. And this person was not Guo Zhengyan, who was just a small mayor, but the former deputy commander of the Southwest Military Region, Lieutenant General Zhang Yazhong, who had now been promoted to Beijing. He was the big boss who had invited Yang Yi to be the spokesperson of the Southwest Military Region. Although France could not find any information and refused to admit their mistakes, in the hands of the senior officials of various countries, there was a piece of information about what happened inside the train station. In China, there was a lot of information about this. Although it had not been confirmed who did it, Zhang Yazhong had asked Luo Zongxing and Xin Xinyu. Needless to say, Who else but old Yang could kill so many people single-handedly with such great skills? This guy is too bad. He even got into a fight with KBFC. Shun Xinyu was so excited that she couldn't wait to fight side by side with Yang Yi. Luo Zongxing was much calmer. He held Shun Xinyu down, gave her a look and said, "It might not be Yang Yi. His identity is different now. It's unlikely that he would make a move casually. Moreover, I haven't seen him for more than a year. I don't know if his skills have deteriorated." Although Luo Zongxing was covering for Yang Yi, everyone was well aware. In any case, these private discussions would not be leaked. Zhang Yazhong also asked for help and asked the embassy to help Yang Yi solve the problems as much as possible, so that Yang Yi could be brought back as soon as possible. After all, Yang Yi was also one of the military's own people. After knowing that they would be back in China soon, Yang Yi and Murphy looked at each other and smiled. Murphy also held Yang Yi's hand tightly. She was very happy. At noon, everyone ate dumplings together, and ate the reunion dinner prepared by the embassy's chefs. They celebrated Chinese New Year's Eve together with the time in China. Of course, an essential program for the Chinese New Year was watching the Spring Festival Gala. It was worth mentioning that the video they recorded in the morning was also shown on the Spring Festival Gala. Yang Yi and his family appeared in the French embassy, which caused quite a stir in China. Of course, during this time, Yang Yi's phone calls were endless. The calls from his relatives and friends across the sea were basically nonstop. It was not until the Spring Festival Gala ended, and people in China fell asleep to the sound of firecrackers, that Yang Yi's situation finally calmed down. The Chinese New Year's Spring Festival Gala had ended, but in Paris, night had just fallen. The embassy's own celebration of the Chinese New Year had just begun. After the ambassador gave a simple speech, he smiled and said, "Let's not beat around the bush. Tonight, a celebrity couple, who can't be invited even if we spend a lot of money in China, will come to our banquet hall. We can't let them go. Yang Yi, Murphy, why don't the two of you perform first?" This was already discussed. Yang Yi and Murphy had also practiced this new song in private. Therefore, Yang Yi stood up with a smile and made a gentlemanly gesture of invitation. Murphy gently held Yang Yi's outstretched hand. The two of them looked at each other sweetly and walked to the center of the banquet hall. Perhaps it was because she was on the stage, but Murphy's temperament suddenly changed. She, who had become weak because of worry and fear, was now calm and composed. It was as if she had naturally become the focus of the stage. Murphy showed a strong sense of confidence. "Hey, it's Papa and Mom." She clapped her hands and shouted excitedly. She had been playing at Sister Kai's table this afternoon. She was very happy to see her parents on the stage. She excitedly reached out and tugged at Tong Tong, who was busy eating snacks. "Little brother, look, it's Papa and Mom." With this tug, the fried dough twist in Tong Tong's hand fell from his pants and rolled to the ground. When she saw this, she scratched her head a little embarrassedly and whispered, But Papa and Mom, they want to sing." Sister Kai noticed this and quickly withdrew her clapping hand. She helped break open a section of the fried dough twist and handed it to Tong Tong. She said, "It's okay that it fell. There's more." Chapter 1286. With the new fried dough twist, little Momo was very open-minded. His two little hands carefully held the new fried dough twist and began to gnaw on it. He even smiled proudly at his sister, as if he had forgotten about the half of the fried dough twist that had fallen on the ground. She glanced at Tong Tong, but did not argue with him. Instead, she focused on her father and mother, who were walking to the center of the stage. Especially her father. When she saw her father walking to the long zither that had been prepared for him, she could not help but jump on the chair excitedly. "Yang Yi is going to play the zither?" Sister Kai asked her colleagues in surprise. Cici turned her head and looked at Big Sister Kai. She happily reported to her, "That's right. Where's the zither?" "Your father knows how to play the zither? That's amazing," Sister Kai exclaimed as she gave Shishi a thumbs up. At this time, Tong Tong finally raised his head. His mouth was full as he mumbled, Papa is amazing." You might not believe it, but Tong Tong's tongue was entangled by the fried dough twist so that he could not make the super sound. Cici giggled and nodded. She then turned her little head back and looked at her father without blinking. They were not the only ones who were surprised. The students and staff at the other tables were looking at Yang Yi in surprise. Even the foreign ambassadors at the main table were looking at the ancient Chinese instrument with great interest, waiting for Yang Yi's performance. Yang Yi sat in front of the zither while Murphy adjusted the position of the microphone for him. Yang Yi put on his fake nails and teased the audience with a smile. Since it's a traditional Chinese festival, and there are so many international friends participating, it's natural to use our traditional Chinese instruments to spread our long and beautiful culture. Everyone laughed knowingly. The ambassador at the main table also translated Yang Yi's words to the foreign guests with a smile. Yang Yi's movements were very fast. He taped up the fake nails, and Mo Fei also picked up her microphone and stood gracefully beside Yang Yi. At first glance, the two of them looked like a perfect couple, which was also envied by others. "A full moon night, I hope you like it," Yang Yi announced. He then looked at Murphy gently, and began to play the zither. The prelude to the zither was beautiful. After all, it was a zither. The melodious sound was like pearls falling on a jade plate. Everyone could not help but close their eyes and listen to it. For those foreigners who did not know how to appreciate it, although they could not hear how wonderful it was, they would still be a little amazed. They felt that it was not easy for a big guy like Yang Yi to be able to easily control this complicated stringed instrument and play such a beautiful sound. They all applauded. However, the accompaniment could not steal the limelight of the song. After the prelude, Murphy raised the microphone and sang in her soft and hoarse voice. "The spring breeze blows into my heart. I miss you so much that I can't fall asleep. Why can't you understand the meaning of the falling flowers? You can only look at the bright moon outside the window." The lyrics were a bit like a young girl's tenderness, sweet and sorrowful, but Mo Fei's voice was not as sweet as a young girl's. It was even slightly hoarse, as if it carried the sadness of time. However, just like Yang Qianqian, who Yang Yi had heard in his previous life, Mo Fei's singing was very sincere and could still touch the softness of people's hearts. Next, it was Yang Yi's turn. He played the zither while looking at Murphy and sang, "The moon hangs high, curved like your eyebrows." Indeed, Yang Yi sang well. He was gentle like a patient and considerate uncle. Many of the girls who were listening to the song below were mesmerized. But to be honest, in the interpretation of this song, Yang Yi could not be compared to Murphy. After entering the performance state, Murphy seemed to have overcome the obstacles of the past few days. She smiled sweetly at Yang Yi and sang with her, not very sweet, voice that could turn women gay. Especially when the two of them sang the first lines of the Shui Diao Getu. "When will the bright moon appear? With a cup of wine in my hand, I ask the blue sky. I wonder what year it is in the heavenly palace." Sister Kai, who was sitting next to Shishi, could not help but hold her face and murmur happily, "Wow, it's so beautiful." It was not just beautiful. The way Yang Yi and Murphy sang together was so sweet that it was intoxicating. The love and sweetness that melted in the song was even more enviable. Cece heard the commotion and turned to look at Big Sister Kai. She knew that Big Sister Kai was cheering for her parents' performance. She giggled happily and puffed out her chest proudly. Yang Yi and Mo Fei's performance gave people a feeling that the beginning was the peak. The next few programs performed by the versatile international students, although there were interesting skits and French songs, which still won the applause of the audience, compared to them, it always gave people a feeling that something was lacking. It was not only the performances that were lacking. After Shishi and Tong Tong finished their performances, they returned to their parents' side. Sister Kai's table also lost a lot of chatter and laughter. But fortunately, Shishi still had a performance to perform. After the ambassadors pushed each other and sang a song, the host of the gala went over to invite Shishi to play the piano on stage when the performance was about to become even more dull. "Yay! Shishi, Shishi, Shishi." Under the cheers of a few students who were a little excited after drinking some red wine, Sister Kai also smiled and raised her arms to cheer in unison. Everyone was so enthusiastic that Cece, who had just come down from the chair, felt a little embarrassed. She twisted her little butt in embarrassment and threw herself back into her father's arms. She hugged her father's arm while sticking out her little head and looking outside shyly. Tong Tong, who was snuggling up to his mother out of boredom, heard everyone shouting his sister's name. It took him a while to come back to his senses. He propped himself up on his chubby arms and looked at his sister. Then he looked left and right at his excited brothers and sisters with a confused expression. What's wrong? What's wrong with my sister? When Yang Yi saw that she was embarrassed, he smiled and held her hand. He stood up and said gently, "Let's go. Play to Alice for everyone. You performed it in front of so many people last time. I believe you can do it. Everyone is calling me." She hugged her father, raised her head, and whispered, "That's because everyone likes you very much. Look, even Sister Kai is giving you a thumbs up." Yang Yi laughed. In fact, the performance at the train station in Leipzig last time had given Shishi some courage. This time, with her father by her side, she didn't need much persuasion. She finally plucked up her courage and sat on the piano stool. Although the piano in the banquet hall was only an ordinary upright piano, due to limited funds, and although Cece's piano skills had not improved much compared to the last time, she was able to play Ode to Alice smoothly. The beautiful melody won her praise from the entire banquet hall. When Shishi was performing, the Canadian ambassador to France, Mr. Smith, thought of something and turned to the Chinese ambassador in surprise. He asked, "Is this the little girl who performed at the train station in Leipzig?" After getting an affirmative answer, Smith said with emotion, "I've seen that video. Yesterday my wife showed it to our daughter, hoping that she would also learn to play the piano well. I didn't expect to see the real person at the Chinese embassy today." Shishi didn't know that she had already gained many fans all over the world. However, after Shishi's short performance, everyone was still a little unsatisfied. They were all cheering, hoping to hear the performance of the other protagonist of the video, Yang Yi. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment, but still agreed generously. He took the host's microphone and said, "Before the party begins, let's observe a moment of silence for the misfortune that happened at the train station in Paris a few days ago. Indeed, the festive atmosphere of the festival has diluted the sadness in our hearts to a certain extent, but I hope that we can use this beautiful festival to pray that such a terrible thing will never happen again." After saying it in Chinese, Yang Yi repeated it in English, eliminating the need for the female host to translate. However, it was obvious that this English was said to the other foreign guests. This posture suddenly became solemn. Of course, the atmosphere had already become a little heavy due to Yang Yi's instigation. However, everyone still clapped warmly. They saw Yang Yi sitting on the piano stool, and at the same time, he placed the microphone in his hand on the shelf that he moved over, aiming it at his mouth. Was he going to improvise? The overseas student fans who liked Yang Yi were pleasantly surprised. Shishi didn't go down, and Yang Yi let the little girl sit next to him. Although Shishi didn't perform much, Yang Yi still wanted to let Shishi experience what a real performance was like up close. Chapter 1287. Shishi liked to watch her father play the piano, especially when she was sitting close to him. Whether it was in the side hall at home or in a public place like this, Shishi felt that her father looked very good when he played the piano and sang. Perhaps it was the charm of confidence, or perhaps it was the effect of the music. Anyway, her father was super cool. Therefore, the little girl sat next to her father obediently. First, she looked at her father's skillful playing with envy. "I want to play like you, Dad. You play so well." Then, when her father began to hum softly into the microphone, the little girl raised her head again and looked at her father's side profile attentively, listening attentively. "There's a place in your heart, I know it's love." Yang Yi's voice was very soft, as if he was gently persuading a child. There was no sense of the vicissitudes and strength in his voice at all. It was as if he was a different person singing. But it was true. Yang Yi was singing a very famous charity song, Heal the World by Michael Jackson, the world's greatest superstar in his previous life. Like MJ, Yang Yi sang with soft feelings and showed his concern for the children in his voice. Don't think that Yang Yi's English song was a little high. Everyone present, including the staff of the embassy, was a language expert. Even if the foreign students mainly studied French, The students who were able to study abroad and were invited to the embassy dinner party were basically students with good grades. The English that they learned in China was definitely not bad. Therefore, the simple lyrics of the English song that Yang Yi sang could be understood by everyone. Even Xi, who was sitting next to Yang Yi, could completely understand the content of her father's song, let alone the foreign students who had studied for so many years. The opening line, "There's a place in your heart, I know it's full of love." The content was not complicated. It was similar to the meaning of human nature is good at birth. The purpose of it was to awaken people's love for the world. Yang Yi sang softly. The lyrics, accompanied by the slow rhythm and beautiful piano music, flowed slowly into everyone's hearts like a clear spring. The entire conference hall quieted down. Whether it was the Chinese or the invited foreign guests, especially the ambassador of Canada and France, Mr. Smith, who admired Yang Yi's daughter very much, they all put down their chopsticks and listened solemnly. In this place, you'll feel there's no pain or sorrow. There are many ways to reach the place of love in your heart, as long as you care for life. As Yang Yi slowly hummed, the thoughts that he wanted to express gradually revealed themselves. It turned out that Yang Yi did not criticize the brutality of the KBFC like the media outside. Instead, he went back to the source and grasped the crux of the problem. He even hoped that everyone would care for life, reduce conflicts, and call for a cessation of war so that the world could return to love and peace. Just like what he sang in the lyrics, make it a space, make it a place, heal the world, give each other a little more space, make this land a better place, save the world. The lyrics were quite catchy, especially the last line. Make it a place for you and for me, and the entire human race, make this land a better place for you, for me, and even for all mankind. Everyone listened to it once or twice and memorized it. Xi sat at the side and listened to her father sing. In fact, Xi could still understand the literal meaning of the lyrics, but gradually, the little girl's limited thinking ability could not keep up with the deeper meaning of the lyrics. However, this did not prevent Xi from listening to her father's singing and appreciating the beauty in her father's voice. For example, there are people pledging, if you care for me, make it a place for you and for me. Xi found it difficult to understand the meaning of the lyrics, but she could hear the more memorable beauty of the lyrics because of the rhyme. She could also see that when her father sang this part, he gently shook his head because he had to raise his voice. At this moment, only deep admiration was left in the little girl's heart. She could not help but turn her head to look at the brothers and sisters, uncles and aunts around her. They were all listening very seriously, and there were even many people who were shaking their hands along with the melody. Their engrossed appearance made Xi feel her father's charm even more clearly. My papa, Xi thought proudly, firmly imprinting the cool appearance of her father playing the piano and singing a song in her heart. This song was very long, so long that when Yang Yi sang to the end, everyone could gently nod and hum a few words. Make it a place for you and for me. However, no matter how long the song was, it had to end. Because it was a live performance, Yang Yi did not repeat too many times in the end, nor did he drag it out too long. He just ended it with a simple trill, and gently raised his hand. The whole banquet hall was silent. Everyone was silently recalling this calm song with an indescribable feeling. When Yang Yi stood up, everyone seemed to suddenly wake up and warmly applauded for Yang Yi. The sudden applause caught Xi off guard. She jumped down from the chair to take her father's hand when she saw him waving to her. The little girl was a little surprised and took half a step back slightly. She leaned on her father and carefully opened her big eyes. She saw the brothers and sisters, uncles and aunts sitting at the table applauding first. Then, after the uncles at the main table stood up, they also stood up one after another and gave them a bigger round of applause. There seemed to be an indescribable sense of honor spreading in the little girl's heart. Xi felt her little hand being squeezed by her father. She came back to her senses and looked up at him. Then, under her father's signal, she nervously turned around with him and bowed to the audience. At this time, the little girl heard a tall foreign uncle at the main table ask, "Yang, what's the name of your song?" Cici knew that this was a question for her father. The little girl turned to look at her father, only to see him calmly nod and reply in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. "The world." Then Shishi saw the tall foreign uncle give her father a thumbs up and praise him. Thank you. And you're right. Thank you. You're right. We should be more concerned about life and creating a better world. For some reason, Shishi felt that this uncle's praise and recognition of her father seemed to carry a lot of weight. Many people cheered and applauded for this. However, before Shishi could react in a trance, the little girl was surprised to see the tall foreign uncle give her a thumbs up again. He smiled and said, "And you, little girl? You're the best piano player. My daughter and I both like your performance very much. Keep up the good work." This sudden praise caught Shishi off guard. The little girl was a little embarrassed and hid behind her father. Her well-behaved and cute appearance once again won her the love of everyone's laughter. Chapter 1288. The next afternoon, at the international airport in Paris, Ambassador Gao Yi sent off Yang Yi's family, who had taken the first flight home to Shanghai after the restrictions were lifted, on behalf of the embassy. Since Sister Kai was not very busy with work, she also volunteered to come and send off Shishi on behalf of all the staff members who liked her. Lu Weisha's family originally wanted to come as well. David and the others were also worried sick when they heard from the news that Yang Yi's family was in danger. However, Yang Yi didn't want this small matter to affect his friend's work and studies, so he didn't agree. After much persuasion, Lu Weisha's family finally gave up on the idea. However, before boarding the plane, Sister Kai, who was still relatively young, couldn't help but feel sad in her heart. She hugged Shishi and cried, "Shishi, I really can't bear to part with you. You've brought us so much joy these past few days." Big Sister Xiao Kai squatted on the ground like a child, holding Shishi's hand with tears in her eyes as she sobbed. "Sister Kai, don't cry, okay? If you cry, I want to cry too." Sob sob. Shishi seemed to resonate with Sister Kai, and her eyes suddenly turned red. The little girl's skin was white and soft, and when her eyes and nose turned red, it was as if she had put on a layer of natural rouge. The redness gradually faded, and it made people's hearts ache. Okay, I won't cry. I like you so much." Sister Kai couldn't bear to see Shishi cry, so she quickly took out 2 pieces of tissue. One was for herself, and the other was for Shishi. She pretended to be relaxed and smiled. "Sister Kai, you can also come home with us. You can come to our house as a guest. Let me tell you, my father can make a lot of delicious food." Shishi sniffed and said seriously. Sister Kai smiled through her tears and said, "Thank you, Shishi. Thank you for inviting me to your house as a guest, but I still have work to do." Even though Sisi was very reluctant to part with Sister Kai, who had formed a deep friendship with her in the past few days, the little girl still boarded the plane back to China with her father, mother, and brother. However, on one side was a farewell, and on the other side was a reunion. Shishi was still jet-lagged, and when she walked out of the airport in Shanghai in her father's arms, she saw Lan Xian waiting for her outside. Yes, Lan Hao Kai had brought Lan Xian to pick her up at the airport. Other than Yang Huan, who was far away in his hometown for the new year, and Mo Xiaowan, Guazi, Ding Xiang, Lu Xiaoshu Miao Chuan, and even Zhu Jia, who had heard the news, all came to pick her up at the airport. Of course, Yang Yi hadn't seen them yet because he wanted to keep a low profile. Guazi and the others were quite popular now, and they were too big of a target. In order not to cause a sensation, they stayed in the minibus outside for the time being. When Yang Yi carried Shishi and pushed the luggage trolley out of the VIP passage, Lan Xian saw them. Her loud and clear voice lit up, and she shouted happily, "Shishi, Papa Yang." Fortunately, there weren't many people in the VIP passage, so Lan Xian's shout didn't attract anyone's attention. She only attracted the attention of Shishi, who was still half asleep. Because she had just woken up, her hair was fluffy and messy. She felt that she was ugly, so Shishi had been burying her head in her father's arms. When she heard the shout, she raised her head in a daze. Suddenly, the little girl couldn't help but shout in surprise, "Xian air!" Yang Yi put her down with a smile, and Shishi couldn't wait to run to her little friend, whom she hadn't seen for more than half a month. The little girl's steps were light, and when she ran with her long legs, she was like the wind. In a flash, she ran to Lan Xian, who was just in a lazy running posture, but actually didn't run much. Hee hee. Excian air. Shishi hugged Lan Excian happily. The two little girls shouted and laughed, jumping over there. Lan Excian shouted, Shishi, I missed you so much. I thought you were coming back, but you didn't. Then my parents said that they were very worried about you. Papa said that he can't come back yet, so we stayed in a big house first. But we're all Chinese. Cece described her experience in the past few days to her friends with a smile of exultation. Yang Yi and Murphy, who was holding Tong Tong, followed behind. Lance Hao Kai was a little emotional. He also hugged Yang Yi. Although he had a lot of questions, he only had one sentence left. He patted Yang Yi on the shoulder, breathed a sigh of relief, and said with a smile, It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back. Wu Jingjing, on the other hand, pulled Murphy aside and asked about her well-being. The two women whispered and chatted happily. Yang Yi also missed Lan Excian. Without the chubby little girl running around in front of him looking for food, Yang Yi always felt that something was missing. Therefore, after a few simple words with Lance Hao Kai, he turned around, lowered his head, and patted Lan Excian on the shoulder. He smiled and teased her. Excianaire, come, give Papa Yang a hug. Let's see if you've gained weight after playing with your grandparents. If you've gained weight, Papa Yang will have to supervise your exercise later. Lan Excian actually deliberately ignored Papa Yang. Now that she heard Papa Yang's words, her little mouth pouted even higher. The chubby little girl couldn't help but snort and say, No, I don't want to be hugged by you. As if she was no longer sleepy, she pulled her little friend's hand and hid while mischievously shouting to her father, Papa, you have to carry both of us up. What's so difficult about that? Yang Yi laughed heartily. He took a step forward with his long legs and caught the two giggling little girls. He held Shishi and Lan Excian in his arms like two bags. You've gained weight, you've gained weight. Excianaire, you've eaten too much delicious food at Grandpa and Grandma's house. Yang Yi smiled and teased Lan Excian. No, Shishi has gained weight. Lan Excian giggled, pointed at Shishi and shouted loudly. I didn't, haha, Excianaire has gained weight. Shishi also shouted, and the alliance between the two girls suddenly collapsed. When they returned to the minibus, Shishi and Lan Excian didn't want Yang Yi to leave. They followed him like two little followers. When Yang Yi finished greeting everyone, Shishi and Lan Excian dragged Yang Yi to sit at the back. In this way, Yang Yi could sit facing the aisle, and the two girls could happily sit on both sides of him. These two guys. Murphy smiled gently and shook her head. She and Wu Jingjing sat together and chatted. Mo Xiaowan and Ding Xiang sat behind them. The few women gathered together and had a lot to talk about. When the minibus was on the highway back to Jiang City, the chatter in the bus gradually weakened. Because Tong Tong and Shishi didn't have jet lag and were sleepy, no one dared to disturb them. However, Lan Excian's eyes turned. She knelt on the seat and climbed up with her father's arm. Father Yang, I missed you so much. You're home so late. When no one was looking, Lan Excian finally giggled and acted coquettishly with Papa Yang. I can't help it. In fact, I also wanted to come back early. Yang Yi rubbed the chubby girl's head and said, Then, when you were abroad, did you learn how to cook those delicious food? Cece has already shown me the photos. They're super yummy, I can still remember them. Lan Excian giggled as she puffed out her tummy. Chapter 1289. Although Yang Yi's family had returned to China, their international influence had not diminished. On the contrary, Yang Yi and Shishi reappeared in front of everyone because of an edited video released by the Chinese embassy in France on the international micro-broadcasting. They became the focus of praise and attention all over the world. Many mainstream media outlets in the West reprinted the video of Yang Yi singing Heal the World in their news reports. ABC's news host, who liked Yang Yi very much, said exaggeratedly, Yang is a model artist. He knows what he can do. He uses music to wake up confused people. Listen to how he sings. The host, who was as handsome and flirtatious as a coquettish person, closed his eyes, wrinkled his nose and shrugged his shoulders. He struggled to raise his voice and sang with great effort. There are people pledging, if you care for me, make it a better place for you and for me. Then he shook his head and sighed. I love this song to death. Friends, really, please stop those damn wars. Let's make our world a more peaceful and beautiful place together. Please don't let such a tragedy happen again. Please don't let anyone get hurt again. God damn it, I like Yang and his song so much. The host smiled as if he hadn't had enough of it. It was not just ABC. When the video was at its peak, almost all media outlets were reporting on it. When ordinary Western people watched the video, they also had a very devout love for the song. Just look at the comments under the international micro-broadcasting that the Western media reprinted the video. I used to think that Chinese people always like to stay out of things. Yang changed my mind. His appeal moved me. I should also learn to care for life. I didn't expect a Chinese musician to be able to write such a meaningful English song. But later, when I checked Yang's previous songs, I realized that I was ignorant. My favorite song, Diamonds, was actually written by him. What's more, it was originally sung by his wife. Yang is an excellent musician, and he is also a good person with a heart of gold. Do you see his daughter, the little girl who played the beautiful piano at the train station? She's sitting next to her father and listening. I love this scene. Yang is promoting the idea of caring for life to the child, to the next generation of people who can change the world. That's so loving, so sweet. The video became popular abroad and naturally attracted the attention of the domestic media. Even under the lead of some official media, many mainstream media outlets were praising it. They said that Yang and Murphy did not forget to spread positive energy while traveling abroad, showing the boundless love of the Chinese people to foreigners. Driven by the hot topic, countless media outlets also made special reports. They detailed the development history of Yang and Murphy over the past few years, details of Yang and Murphy's love and happiness. They followed the trend and praised Yang and Murphy, earning the attention of the public. However, just as the reporters from all over the country were excited to find Yang and Murphy, who had already returned to China, some people gradually realized that no one could find Yang and Murphy. Even their Phoebe studio was very low-key and tactfully rejecting all interview requests. What was going on? Now was the time when they were famous and could continue to win the favor of the people all over the country. Why did they quietly stop all their work in the entertainment industry? Why did it seem like they suddenly disappeared in front of the public? Of course, Yang and Murphy did not really disappear. They made a trip back to their hometown at the end of the Chinese New Year. Later, when the new semester started, there were still reporters who took pictures of Yang at the entrance of Shishi's school. They also took pictures of Yang and Murphy at the entrance of the Phoebe studio. However, they still did not accept any interviews. Finally, in the middle of February, in the latest episode of Jixin Interview, Yang and Murphy, who had made their first appearance since the incident at KBXJ at the Paris train station, expressed their thoughts to their fans through Luo Xin. It turned out that after surviving a disaster, Yang and Murphy realized the value of life. They also hoped to spend more time with their families and take care of their children's healthy growth. At this point, the audience could only complain helplessly. Don't you spend enough time with your families? In the past, before this incident, I didn't see you appearing in public often. I didn't see you leaving your children behind to rush to work. Of course, Yang and Murphy knew that in their hearts. They said this as an excuse. Yang and Murphy made this choice because Yang felt that the more they were in the eye of the storm, the more they should keep a low profile. On one hand, they had to use a positive image to get rid of suspicion. On the other hand, they had to be careful to avoid being shot at. Reducing their exposure was the best choice. It just so happened that Murphy also suffered some psychological trauma because of that incident. She also hoped that she could live a peaceful life with Yang Yi's company and walk out of this shadow. Therefore, on Sister Luo Xion's program, Yang and Murphy also announced their decision to temporarily leave the entertainment industry this year. Not only did they not take any jobs, but they also would not arrange a concert schedule this year. However, because they had previously promised to their fans, Murphy's new album would still be released and sold in the country's music halls and Sahara Online Mall according to the original plan. After the latest episode of Jixin Interview was broadcasted, Phoebe Studios' official micro-broadcasting also forwarded the video, and announced the release date of Murphy's new album while apologizing to her fans. But interestingly, in the comments section below this micro-broadcasting, Yang E and Murphy's fans had the same attitude. They were calm, so calm that they didn't seem like their fans. Don't worry. It's fine as long as you have the album. Just let us know in advance when you're coming back. As long as you're doing well, we'll continue to pay attention to your music. It's good to spend more time with your family. Cultivate Shishi and Huawei well. These two little cuties must inherit your music career in the future. Speaking of which, even if you don't hold a concert or accept any program announcements, it won't affect you guys from releasing songs. Yang E is inspired to write a song, and you guys can go to the recording studio to record it. You can just send it to us to listen to. We definitely won't mind. ******. Perhaps it was also because Murphy's previous 2 retirements from the music industry had made these fans used to it. Everyone showed a tolerance that amazed the entertainment reporters. Yang E and Murphy's popularity was still declining bit by bit. Even though Murphy's album attracted a lot of attention in March, and many of Yang Yi's works were released later, there were some news reports about them from time to time. However, it was undeniable that they almost never appeared in front of the media reporters before July. Chapter 1290. Although Yang E and Murphy had entered a state of retirement, their legends were still circulating in the entertainment industry. First of all, after the Spring Festival, the large-scale anti-corruption TV series, In the Name of the People, began airing on Jiangnan TV station's primetime slot. This TV series became popular before it was aired, because its scriptwriter was Yang E. Even if Yang E was currently very popular in China, the ratings of this TV series would not be low. What's more, its director was Chen Fengchen, and there was a large group of veteran actors who could definitely be called acting masters. Moreover, it was a realistic theme that attracted a lot of attention. When it first aired in February, its ratings broke Jiangnan TV station's own record. After that, this TV series caused a lot of discussion on the internet. Some young people who usually didn't watch this kind of TV series couldn't help but join in the fun. Naturally, at the end of February, its ratings were close to the previous record of Soldier's Assault on CCTV. Although it was a pity that it didn't break the record of Soldier's Assault, in the end, Yang Yi's works once again showed such strong popularity. The discussion about whether Yang Yi could be considered a gold medal scriptwriter was once again rampant. Next, after entering March, Murphy's new album quietly appeared on the shelves of various music stores without any promotion. She didn't go to major TV stations to participate in singing competitions. This album, called Stories of a Small Town, featured slow old-fashioned love songs. In the album list, in addition to Stories of Jiangcheng and Stealing Time, which Murphy sang in the concert before, there were also many songs that Murphy sang solo, such as Red Bean, I Only Care About You, Just Like Your Gentleness. Of course, just like Murphy's previous album, Yang Yi also participated in this album. However, the song that Yang Yi and Murphy sang together in this album was not the song Full Moon Night that they sang at the Embassy's Spring Festival Gala. Full Moon Night was a song that came out later. Phoebe Studios' micro-broadcasting also promised to release these songs in the form of singles. In the album Stories of a Small Town, Yang Yi and Murphy sang, You're the Most Precious. This song was more affectionate than Full Moon Night. After all, in Yang Yi's previous life, this was a song sung by the god of songs. With so many fine songs, Murphy's new album Stories of a Small Town naturally showed excellent quality that surprised the fans. Although its release didn't deliberately create a big momentum in advance, after its release, it was still the album that all the music critics rushed to comment on. Even as early as the end of February, a music magazine ranked the most anticipated album in March. Murphy's new album ranked first on both the music critics and music fans lists. But what surprised the entire music industry and caused a heated discussion was the album's results after its official release. Because Murphy didn't participate in any TV station's music chart program, the songs of this album couldn't be seen on the New Song Elite list, the Music Power list, and other related lists. But in addition to these lists, Murphy's new songs still showed the performance of dominating the other lists. On the new song bestseller list, the first song was Red Bean. Among the top 10 songs, Murphy's new songs occupied 7 positions. There was no suspense on the radio new song chart. The first place was dominated by the confession song, I Only Care About You. In addition, 5 of the top 10 songs were from the Stories of a Small Town album. Of course, the most important list was the new album sales chart. From the first day of March, Stories of a Small Town showed amazing strength. It was far ahead with nearly twice the sales of the second place. Although many singers chose to delay the release of their albums in order to avoid Murphy's limelight, Murphy's new album showed the same strong performance as her Say It Yet album released at the end of the year before last, which shocked the whole music industry. And the music media kept exclaiming, "The wolf is coming." An album, without much publicity investment, could sell such a performance, which was enough to make people sigh with emotion about Murphy's charm and Yang Yi's strength. In mid-March, Stories of a Small Town broke the platinum record with the sales data of 20 million. Although it was not able to break the record set at the end of the year before last, this terrifying speed still made many media outlets scramble to report it. In late March, the sales volume of Stories of a Small Town had reached an unattainable figure, but at this time, the media had already expressed aesthetic fatigue, with a wry smile, and were too surprised to move. Of course, these honors were not surprising. Murphy did not accept any media interviews because of this. It was just that Yang Yi and Murphy's fans were too happy. Not only could they buy the new album and 12 new songs that they could slowly listen to and appreciate, but they could also be proud for a long time because of the hot discussion caused by Murphy. But no matter how well Murphy's album sold and how loud the concert was, Yang Yi and Murphy had no intention of making a comeback. At most, there were paparazzi who secretly took photos of Yang Yi and Murphy taking Tong Tong to the spring sports meeting held by Shishi's school. This was one of the few times they showed their faces during this time. As April approached, Jiangnan TV's variety show, I Am a Singer, welcomed a replacement newcomer. It was a Cantonese singer from Harbor City, Lin Muin. His soulful singing in Cantonese moved many listeners and gained him a lot of fans. Perhaps it was because of the popularity of his fans in Guangdong and Guangxi, or perhaps it was because his singing voice was very special and soothing, but Lin Muin did not get eliminated even though his ranking in each episode was not high. He continued singing all the way until the Battle of the Masked King. Of course, Lin Muin only sang Cantonese songs after all. Even though his backup singer was his senior brother, Chen Yijie, Lin Muin only placed 5th in the end. Regardless of whether he won the honor of being the Masked King of the Year, Lin Muin's solid singing and unique voice made the entire Chinese audience recognize this special singer, Lin Muin. However, after I Am a Singer ended, Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting and Lin Muin's micro-broadcasting both updated their statuses at the same time. All of a sudden, the fans of both parties and many passers-by were surprised. Let me formally introduce to everyone Lin Muin, a Cantonese singer from Tianxiang Records. He's also my little brother. Back then, he came to Jiangqing with his girlfriend and started singing at my coffee shop. Now he's finally made a name for himself with his own efforts, and has realized his dream of singing Cantonese songs in front of the whole country. Please support him. Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting also included a photo. It looked like it was taken recently. Lin Muin and his wife, Ran Jin, were sitting at a coffee table with Yang Yi and Murphy. Lin Muin also thanked Yang Yi for his previous nurturing in the micro-broadcasting. He took the initiative to mention that he was introduced to Chen Yijie's company by Yang Yi. He also learned singing from Yang Yi, Murphy, and Yang Yi's producer, teacher Ji Ningming. Many mushy words did not need to be repeated. Lin Muin and Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting interaction surprised many media reporters. They thought that Lin Muin's participation in I Am a Singer was not only due to his own ability, but also due to the operations of Tianxiang Records behind him. However, they did not know that Lin Muin actually had such a relationship with Yang Yi. However, whether it was the media or the public, they still had a good impression of Lin Muin. Many of the entertainment industry's verified accounts praised Lin Muin and Yang Yi's approach. After all, if it was exposed in advance, not only would it make Lin Muin more famous, but it would also affect the final results of I Am a Singer. Now that the dust had settled in Yang Yi and Lin Mu, and announced it on micro-broadcasting, the friendship between these two capable singers would become a much-told story in the entertainment industry. Chapter 1291. Before May and mid-June, the news about Yang Yi and Murphy had decreased a lot, but in late June, the media was surprised to find that Yang Yi's work was going to be released during the summer vacation. The Truman Show, which was filmed last year, was a work written by Yang Yi and fully funded by Yang Yi's company. Because Yang Yi had basically not been in charge for the past 6 months, the early publicity of the movie was a little lacking. But it didn't matter. After the movie test screening, many reporters looked dignified and were full of sadness. They were all shocked by the reality TV show that could manipulate other people's lives, and they were also moved by the protagonist, Truman, who was not willing to surrender to the so-called fate, played by Guo Ziyi. The movie is so illusory that it makes people feel like it's telling a story from another world. But it's so real that you always have a fear that it may happen around us in the near future. The scenes in the movie are shocking. Do you dare to imagine that except for yourself, everything is not real? From your closest parents, lovers, neighbors, passers-by, they are all just supporting roles, on standby by your side 24 hours a day. If you can't believe it, please come and watch this movie. Yang Yi is indeed a master of manipulating people's hearts. His new work has once again shocked people's hearts. There is no need to elaborate on the content. Come to the cinema, and you will experience a new spiritual baptism. There is an old Chinese saying, life is like a play, and a play is like life. But if you find out that your life is really just a play, how will you react? I like Guo Ziyi's performance. He vividly portrayed Truman's struggle and efforts. In this movie, he seems to be Truman himself. From him, you will understand that you can never stop a heart that pursues the truth and freedom. After the test screening, whether it was the passers-by's comments on movie review websites or the film critics' comments in their own columns, they all gave good reviews without exception. Almost all of them were 5-star reviews, and the final score after the test screening was as high as 9.3. Many netizens who were waiting for the summer vacation to watch the movie were looking forward to it. But the main actor of this movie, Comrade Fatty Guo, was now going through the greatest mental torture of his life. It's over. Guo Ziyi had been recording The Ultimate Challenge with teacher Dan Hongkue for a long time, so he had also learned a few northeastern dialects. He ran to Yang Yi's house and asked Yang Yi for advice with a conflicted expression. What did you do? Yang Yi asked in surprise. Guo Ziyi wanted to say something, but when he turned around, he saw Xixi and Tong Tong standing beside the sofa. Xixi was holding onto the sofa's armrest, and Tong Tong was leaning on his sister's body with his belly protruding. The two kids were looking at him curiously with their eyes wide open. It was as if they had prepared their stools and melon seeds, waiting for him to tell them a story. Ahem, about this matter, Xixi mommy, wait next door for a while. Uncle Little Guo wants to discuss something with your father. Guo Ziyi didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and hurriedly pulled the two kids to the side hall. But we also want to listen to it. Cece pouted her little mouth and said reluctantly, you can't listen for now. Later, I'll ask Sister Ding Xiang to cook something delicious for you. Guo Ziyi coaxed. Tong Tong's hand was pulled, and he beamed with joy when he heard that. He said in a childish voice, hee delicious. Little brother, don't believe it. Uncle Little Guo is lying to kids. Xixi said, but she was still giggling. Guo Ziyi finally coaxed the two kids to the side hall, and let them play with the steamed buns. Then he came back and told Yang Yi with a sad face, Sister Ding Xiang is pregnant. What? Yang Yi and Murphy were both shocked. It was found out yesterday, and she went to the hospital for a checkup. Guo Ziyi smiled foolishly, scratched his head embarrassedly and then sighed. It was obvious that he had a lot going on in his mind. How many months has it been? Mo Fei asked with great interest. Less than 3 months. Then what are you going to do? Yang Yi asked. Murphy interrupted them discontentedly and said, what else can I do? Ding Xiang is pregnant. Little Guo, you should get ready to marry her. Don't be like your brother Yang, who waited until I was pregnant with my second child before marrying me. Yang Yi shook his head helplessly. I also want to marry Sister Ding Xiang, but alas. Guo Ziyi said hesitantly. It turned out that he and Ding Xiang had planned to wait for the movie, The Truman Show, to be released and win the Best Actor award before coming clean with their family. However, The Truman Show was released, and before the award was settled, Ding Xiang found out that she was pregnant. This disrupted Guo Ziyi and Ding Xiang's plan, and they both panicked. You should tell your family quickly. Don't wait until Ding Xiang is pregnant before getting married, Murphy said in a critical tone. Guo Ziyi said worriedly. But if I tell my family directly, will it backfire? I'm worried that if I argue with my family, it will affect Sister Ding Xiang's mood. Now that Ding Xiang was pregnant, Guo Ziyi wanted to take care of her carefully. You have to tell them sooner or later, right? Now is the time. Yang Yi and Murphy gave Guo Ziyi an idea. However, no matter how much his friends said, Guo Ziyi had to deal with this important life event. He went back and thought about it. With Yang Yi and Murphy's opinions, as well as his own ideas, Guo Ziyi took action. On June 20th, although it was 620 and not 520, Guo Ziyi posted his marriage certificate on micro-broadcasting and tagged Ding Xiang. Life is not a game. With this as proof, Guo Ziyi will give you a lifetime of happiness. Ding Xiang, who didn't have any official comments, also forwarded Guo Ziyi's micro-broadcasting on her private micro-broadcasting and said affectionately, "Please take care of me for the rest of my life." With the sudden confession and marriage certificate, Guo Ziyi, who was about to step onto the next level of his career with The Truman Show, actually announced his marriage. This caused an uproar among the media reporters, and the onlookers were even more confused. What? When did he fall in love? How did he get married? Some time ago, some media outlets wrote that Guo Ziyi, who was about to become famous, was a potential stock. They also deliberately fabricated that Yang Yi deliberately cultivated Guo Ziyi to make a qualified husband for Yang Huan. Now Guo Ziyi suddenly gave them two tight slaps on the face. It turned out that Guo Ziyi and Yang Huan did not have any romantic entanglements at all. Just like how they acted in the show, they were a pair of opposite sexes. But who was Ding Xiang? How did Guo Ziyi get a marriage certificate with her without anyone noticing? Some fans who often followed Guo Ziyi and were familiar with Guo Ziyi recognized Guo Ziyi. They were surprised and said, "Hey, isn't she Guo Ziyi's agent? I heard that she was sent by Yang Yi to run some foundation." An actor falling in love with his agent, as long as he didn't get involved, this might be a great story in the entertainment industry. But for Guo Ziyi, his challenge had just begun. He secretly got the marriage certificate and couldn't wait to announce it to the public. That night, Guo Ziyi summoned up the courage to go home. "Don't worry, you stay at home and drink your soup. I'll be back soon. Don't worry, I'll definitely be able to convince them. I'm very confident." Guo Ziyi opened the courtyard door and called Ding Xiang with high fighting spirit. With a smile, he put away his phone and opened the door with his head up and chest out. Bang! Comrade Guo Ziyi knelt down heavily on the floor of the living room. All his movements were natural and smooth, just like Messi, who stopped his leg, put his foot on the ground, and shot his leg. Guo Ziyan, who was sitting on the sofa with her parents in fear, was also dumbfounded by what she saw. "Dad, Mom, please blame me for acting first and reporting later. Please don't blame Ding Xiang and don't scold her. She has a baby now. What's there to be unhappy about? Please scold me." Guo Ziyi knelt on the ground and said with his head lowered. 2 minutes later, Guo Ziyi ran out of the house in a panic. Behind him, a shoe smashed out, followed by Tan Huijian's exasperated scolding. "Stupid brat, you actually left Xiaoding outside. If you don't bring Xiaoding back tonight, see how I'll beat you to death." Chapter 1292. It was July, and this time, the media's focus was on Yang Yi, who had not appeared for a long time, because the amusement park, which had been reported many times, was finally going to welcome the news of its trial opening. On July 1st, the official micro-broadcasting of Yang Yi and Murphy's studio, the official micro-broadcasting of Sahara Press, the official micro-broadcasting of Dreamland Park, the official micro-broadcasting of Dreamland Park, and the official micro-broadcasting of Frozen, which had been operating since the release of the movie last year, all held a repost lottery at the same time. The prize was very special. The 4 official micro-broadcasting companies would draw 100 fans from the fans who reposted the micro-broadcasting and give them tickets to the Ice Kingdom theme park in Dreamland during its trial operation. Dreamland Park was currently only preparing to launch the Ice Kingdom theme park, and there were 2 other theme parks under construction. The Fantasy Garden theme park, which was based on the story of Alice in Wonderland, and the Future World theme park, which was based on the story of Doraemon. But even so, the Ice Kingdom theme park had made many fans, who fell in love with the movie and story of Frozen last year, ecstatic. But it was worth mentioning that the 4 official micro-broadcasting repost lottery activities, in order to prevent people from maliciously manipulating the tickets, limited the participation of fans who followed before that date. In addition, there was also a restriction on real name users, because the tickets would also be real name users, and they would need to check their ID cards and tickets before they could enter. However, this lucky draw was not just a cold rule. It also reflected the care and concern of a human being. Below the microbroadcast, there was also a detailed description of the fans who had won the ticket. If they were married or had children, as long as they brought their household registration book and the user marked on the ticket, they would be able to bring their wife or husband, as well as their children, to the amusement park for free. This is blatant discrimination against single dogs and unmarried friends. Although there were still fans complaining about this rule, in general, everyone praised Yang Yi's generosity, which had solved the needs of many families with children. Hurry up and get married, Boss Yang Yi can't stand it anymore. July 23rd to July 26th was a big day for the trial operation of Dreamland Park. After the trial operation, the park would rest for 5 days and make minor adjustments according to the feedback. Then, from August 1st, Dreamland Park would officially open to the public. However, on July 22nd, many lucky fans who had been selected had already brought their families to Jinling City in Jiangnan. There were even many fans who did not win, but were a little unwilling to give up and came to join in the fun. There were also many reporters who had heard the news, and they gathered in Wuqing County, which had become a star city in Jiangnan, and were waiting to participate in tomorrow's opening ceremony. Both Jinling City and Wuqing County, to maintain a strict culture and hygiene, in order to maintain the local image, under the attention of the whole nation's citizens. Wuqing County even decorated with lanterns and decorations, as if at the new year. Merchants also took the opportunity to hold activities, to provide a good shopping. However, no matter how lively it was outside, no one knew that while they were all looking forward to it, a group of children and their parents had already started their day trip to the amusement park. Needless to say, this group of children was Xixi, Tong Tong Lan Xian, and Xixi's friends, Lu Xiaoyu, Yu Xiaowei, Chen Shiyan, Nan Zhaoyu, Yang Luoqi and Lu Weisha, who had already agreed with Xixi to fly over from Sweden with her mother. Today was a special day for Xixi and her friends. Yang Yi told Xixi that she would be the first to visit the amusement park built for her. Of course, if he only brought Xixi alone, she wouldn't have a good time. Therefore, Yang Yi asked Xixi to invite her best friends. On the day before the trial operation, they would come in and play first. Although Yang Yi also promised to let Xixi's classmates come to the amusement park to play, considering the management and safety issues, the other little students all gave their parents tickets in the form of free tickets. After the official operation, they would only come to play. Of course, Yang Yi didn't want such a happy day to be ruined by those naughty little boys. With Nan Zhaoyu among the little girls, Yang Yi had almost regarded him as a thorn in his side. Therefore, how could Yang Yi allow those naughty kids to disturb his good daughter? Xixi didn't know the little thoughts in her father's mind. She was skipping in front and excitedly introducing to her friends. Let me tell you, it's last year, I came here with Papa, and then I saw that this place hadn't been repaired yet. Look, there are gates here. Wow, look, what is that? Xixi turned a corner and pointed to the tall ice castle in the distance with a look of surprise, and exclaimed excitedly. It was as if Xixi had asked a question that could be answered. Her friends, who had long wanted to speak, and were so excited that their faces were full of bright smiles, all rushed to speak. However, Chen Shiyun's voice was still louder. She shouted loudly, I know that is a castle made out of ice. Haha, it's Sister Aisha. Young Luochi, who always did her homework seriously, followed behind Chen Shiyun, giggled and added. Everyone was chattering, and Lu Weisha was not to be outdone. In order to find Shishi this time, she had received Chinese training from a tutor for half a year. Originally, Lu Weisha had some foundation in Chinese when she was in kindergarten with Shishi. After learning for half a year, she could understand most of what everyone said, and could also chime in a few words. Lu Weisha's accent was a little special, but she still spoke fluently. Sure, is our league going to play? However, when she said that, Cici couldn't understand what Lu Weisha was saying amidst the clamor of everyone's discussion. They switched back to Swedish. After a while, Shishi beamed with joy and said in Chinese, I know Lu Weisha. That's right, this is what we are going to play later. Tong Tong had grown up for half a year, and he had changed a lot. He had grown a lot taller, and his walking had become more solid instead of wobbly. However, at 2.5 years old, he was still a baby. Tong Tong still had his trademark bulging tummy, and his little cheeks were still chubby and pink, making people want to pinch them. In order to avoid the scary eyes of the adults, Tong Tong did not want to be with his mother. He was proud of himself, holding Sister Xiaowei's hand in one hand and Sister Lu Weisha's hand in the other. In order to keep up with his sisters, he walked happily, but he did not feel tired at all. In comparison, Chen Shiyun's younger brother, who was slightly older than him, was a little lackluster. He was carried by his mother, unwilling to get down to walk. While the little fellows were chattering away, the adults were also following behind, chatting and laughing. Boss Lon, look at how happy you are. The properties around you are selling well, right? Chen Guoqiang asked with a smile. How much have the property prices in Wu County Town increased recently? Lans Hao Kai waved his hand cheerfully. Not bad, not bad. It's all thanks to Yang Yi. Wu County Town is developing very well now, and the province is preparing to turn it into a tourism and economic development zone. Hey, do you guys think that a small investment in Wu County Town would be profitable? Chen Guoqiang's mind was very nimble and he spoke up. Let's not talk about this for now. Today, our mission is to accompany the children, have fun, and enjoy ourselves to the fullest. As for business, let's go back and eat before we talk about it, right? Lans Hao Kai spoke very well, and it was very comforting to listen to. He even patted Yang Yi's shoulder and said with a smile, Yang Yi, now that we are in your territory, why don't you introduce us to the fun places here? Chapter 1293. What was so fun about the Ice Kingdom theme park in the City of Dreams? That was too much. It would take half a day to talk about it, not to mention the time it would take to play. Yang Yi clapped his hands with a smile and gathered the children together. He said, Children, today, we'll take advantage of the fact that the sun is not very hot. Let's walk outside and see who can find the most cartoon characters on this curved street. Then, when it's almost noon, we'll go to the snow castle again, okay? Yang Yi still had a strong appeal among this group of children. When he spoke, almost every child looked at him attentively. When he finished speaking, it was as if the little guys had become active again. They jumped and jumped happily, clapping their little palms and shouting, Okay. Shishi was also excited. The little girl had also been carefully dressed today. She was wearing a dress with a top and a skirt, a white sleeveless top, and a black yarn skirt that was actually connected. A few layers of gauze covered her, making her look elegant and elegant. It was also exceptionally breathable and comfortable to wear. After all, the weather in July was a little too hot. Of course, in order to have a good time, Yang Yi still let Shishi wear a pair of sports shoes with these 3 Velcro strips. The color was chosen by her. Shishi liked pink very much. However, what made Shishi most satisfied was the high bun that her father had tied for her. Her hair was tied high so that she wouldn't sweat so much. It also gave people a feeling of vitality, coupled with the white lace headband. Against the little girl's beautiful little face, this little girl was fresh and cute under the sun. She was especially likable. Shishi was so happy that her cheeks were a little red. She raised the corner of her mouth and asked happily, Papa, it's those Sister Elsa, Sister Anna, will they all come? Yes, it's not just them. Some of them will appear in the future, like Alice, Diego, the little squirrel, and so on. They might all appear. You'll have to work hard to find them, Yang Yi said with a smile. What Yang Yi said had actually appeared in the storybooks he had published before, but they were still only the images of illustrations and were still being adapted into movies or cartoons. However, Shishi and her friends had all seen them, and everyone had many of these cartoon characters at home. Therefore, when Yang Yi explained with a smile, the little guys all shouted excitedly. Then let's go find it. Cece let out a cry of joy. Her crisp voice was like the singing of a lark, echoing in the park that was shaded by the trees. It was really not difficult to find. After turning around the passage in front of the gate of the park and circling around a flower bed, Chen Shiyun, who was running at the front, turned around in surprise and shouted, "I found it, Diego!" The children all ran up like a swarm of bees. Lu Weisha followed Shishi and ran out, while Yu Xiaowei could only pull Tong Tong alone. After all, Yu Xiaowei was 2 years older than these little friends. Moreover, she grew up in a single-parent family, so her mind was a little precocious. At the very least, she knew how to take care of Tong Tong's feelings. She didn't dare to run too fast for fear of pulling down Tong Tong. Fortunately, Yu Xiaowei quickly saw the oversized doll that everyone was surrounding. Her anxious mood could slow down a little. This isn't Diego, this is Sid. Sid can stand up and howl. Lu Xiaoyu giggled, baring her fangs and brandishing her claws to show Sid's daily comical appearance. No, this isn't Sid either. Sid is a man, and this one has hair. It should be a woman. I remember. There's one who looks like Sid. Her name is Brooke. She has a super beautiful house. It's all crystal. She had a good memory. She rolled her eyes and said. But at this time, the sloth Miss Brooke suddenly moved. She turned around and stretched out her hand to greet the children. Her expression was still immobile. Unexpectedly, the sudden movement of the big doll startled the children. She also took a few steps back in panic and snuggled with her friends. Nan Jiaoyu couldn't compare to the curious Tong Tong. He was so scared that he hid at the back and even looked at the adults behind him, trying to find help. Are you a monster? Chen Shiyun mustered up her courage and stepped forward to ask. The other party waved his hand, indicating that he was not. In fact, it was a rule of the park that the staff who acted as cartoon characters didn't speak. It was just like in Western countries, where people couldn't tell children that Santa Claus was fake. A cartoon character who didn't speak could at least maintain a sense of realism in front of the children. Perhaps it was because they saw that this big doll was not threatening. The children who were huddled together in fear just now became bold again. Cece couldn't help but take a step forward and ask in a low voice. Then what are you? Why did you suddenly move? What should I do? If I can't speak, how can I answer with body language? The staff stood there awkwardly. Fortunately at this time, Yang Luochi said weakly, Are you really, Brooke? The staff was overjoyed. She gave Yang Luochi a thumbs up. Wow. It's really Brooke. Instantly, the children exclaimed in surprise. You're so beautiful. Your hair is all curly. And your eyes are so big. The group of little girls talked at once. This made the staff member, who was hidden in the thick doll clothes, burst with joy. She cupped her face and made a shy gesture. The adults finally came. Yang Yi waved the camera in his hand and said with a smile, Okay, who wants to take a picture with Miss Brooke? Me, I came first. Chen Shiyun shouted excitedly with her hand raised. Papa, I also want to take a picture with Miss Brooke. She was so excited that her little face was red. She jumped up and down, and her tied hair was a little messy. A few strands of hair fell naughtily beside her ears. First, take a picture together, and then take it one by one. Yang Yi called out. Not only him, but several other parents who brought cameras also picked up their cameras with a smile. They were ready to take a few more pictures of their children and share them in the WeChat group. At first, it was very good. The little girls stood together and happily took a picture with Brooke the sloth with a peace sign. But soon Chen Shiyun shouted excitedly, Uncle Yang, hurry up and take a picture for me. I still want to find others. All of a sudden, the enthusiasm of the little girls was ignited, and they rushed to take a picture quickly. Tong Tong didn't understand why the sisters were so excited. He just sat on the mountain and watched the tigers fight. He jumped briskly beside Lon Xian, waving his little hand and laughing. In the end, the sisters ran forward one by one, followed by their fathers. But when it was his turn to take a picture, Tong Tong suddenly realized that there was only Sister Lon Xian left, whose eyes were shining with wisdom. "Hey, come here. Mommy will play with you." Murphy smiled and clapped her hands. However, Tong Tong turned around and ran to Sister Lon Xian. He pulled on Sister Lon Xian's hand and turned back to his mother with a mischievous smile. Lon Xian didn't mind bringing Tong Tong along. She even said to Tong Tong proudly, "Aya, let's not look for them. They're so big. We will just take pictures." Her explanation was a little confusing, but Lon Xian meant that she wanted to wait for everyone to find them before taking pictures with those cartoon characters. Tong Tong didn't care whether he understood or not. He nodded blankly and habitually said, "Okay." The two little guys, one big and one small, waved their hands and walked in front. Their proud laughter was even more cheerful than the surprised screams of the sisters in front of them. Chapter 1294. Shishi and her friends could play for a whole day if they were asked to simply look for the cartoon characters that were scattered in every corner of the park. However, there were so many fun machines in the park. Soon the children were attracted by Shishi's new discovery. "Come and see. There are so many sleds here." Shishi stood in front and waved her little hands excitedly as she shouted loudly. Finally, the little girl felt that it was not enough, so she softened her voice and added, "It seems like it's really fun." Coincidentally, Lon Xian and Tong Tong were passing by with Murphy and Wu Jingjing, who were chatting happily behind them. When they heard Shishi's call, the two children walked over curiously. "Xian, little brother, look, there are sleds here." When Shishi saw them, she grabbed the railing with one hand and gestured with the other. She could not wait to introduce the sleds to them. "Little brother, these sleds are much bigger than the ones we rode in Sweden." "Pretty sleds?" Tong Tong repeated curiously. Although he could not remember what his sister had said, he was more interested in sleds. He also walked closer and looked at it with his big eyes. Inside, there were many sleds arranged in a large field. The sleds were in different colors. Some were classic green, some were beautiful blue, some were sweet pink, and so on. But without exception, the bottom of the sleds were painted with the sharp-edged look that a sled should have. Actually, this ride was not complicated at all. It was just a modified version of those spinning honeypots or spinning coffee cups. However, the Snow Palace theme park had changed it into the style of a sleigh. Moreover, the entire area where the sleigh moved was decorated with ice blue floors. Even the pillars were decorated with snow-white spruce trees and silver pine trees. It looked like a world of ice and snow. Even though the sun had begun to shine outside, looking at these colors gave one a cool and comfortable feeling. At this moment, Shishi's friends came over one after another. Yu Xiaowei walked over to Tong Tong and grabbed the railing to look inside. She exclaimed softly, "Wow, it's so beautiful." When Tong Tong heard her, he turned around and looked up at Sister Yu Xiaowei and giggled. When Yu Xiaowei lowered her head, Tong Tong mischievously turned his head away as if he was not the one who was giggling just now. "Haha." Yu Xiaowei giggled and reached out to pat Tong Tong's head. "Come, let's sit in the sleds. Each family will get one, but after sitting in the sleds, the children are not allowed to climb up." Yang Yi gestured for the children to change into their slippers and enter the venue. Although the trial operation had not started yet, today was considered a small rehearsal. Therefore, all the staff were at their posts and the sleds could be started for the children to play. However, once they sat in the sleds, it was impossible for the children to settle down. The moment Shishi entered the sleds, she immediately climbed onto the seat and knelt on it. She grabbed the edge of the sleds and giggled as she looked at the other children. Sister, I want to." Tong Tong shouted anxiously. He was still used to asking his sister for help, but in reality, as he grew taller, he could climb up on his own. Tong Tong could not wait any longer. Without waiting for his sister's help, he climbed onto the seat next to his sister. Halfway up, Shishi turned her head and looked at her little brother. Shishi was also very enthusiastic. She grabbed Little Lil Frog's pants and pushed Little Lil Frog's butt up. Finally, Tong Tong came up. He stood on the seat and waved happily at Sister Lon Xian, who was not far away. Over here, over here. Her Majesty is sitting in the middle of the children. Let me take a picture of you. Yang Yi held Murphy's hand and brought her up. After that, he took a step back and smiled as he held the camera. Murphy giggled. She was in a good mood. She hugged Shishi with one hand and Tong Tong's, but with the other as she looked at Yang Yi's camera. However, the two children were restless. Shishi hugged her mom's shoulders and giggled. If mom is the queen, then I'm the princess. Me too, I'm the princess too. Tong Tong quickly said as if he was afraid that his sister would forget to bring him along when she ascended the throne. You're not the princess. You're a boy, so you should be the prince. Shishi retorted. Tong Tong knew that there were princesses and princes. He seemed to have suddenly realized something and said, "Oh, I'm the prince." "No, you're Cinderella. How can you become the princess so easily?" Murphy teased Shishi and laughed. "Ah. No, I want to be the princess," Shishi shouted as she shook her butt coquettishly in front of her mother. When the sleigh started to spin, the entire venue was filled with the cries of the children. Although the sleigh wasn't spinning very fast, the children's cries and sharp laughter made them feel as if they were riding a roller coaster. It wasn't that they were afraid. The sleigh was spinning at an average speed. It spun on its own for a while, then rotated steadily around the outer ring. It wouldn't cause them to feel dizzy at all. However, they had a lot of companionship to play with. Cece, who was usually not so easily agitated, also let her father support her slender waist at this moment. Then she stood on the chair, revealing her smiling face with two missing teeth, and shouted loudly, "Little fishy, I see you. Where are you? Shishi, where are you? Look behind you. Hee hee, I'm going to catch up with you. Drive, drive." Ha ha ha. Just like that, the venue was filled with the children's laughter. Moreover, they were addicted to sitting on the sleigh and couldn't bear to get down. It was as if they couldn't get tired of playing. However, it was also good. Because the sun was high in the sky, the air outside was hot. It was not as comfortable as being in the sleigh venue. All the fathers and mothers took out the water or drinks they brought, and asked the children to drink. It wasn't until after 11 o'clock that the music outside started to play. Yang Yi called out, let's go, let's go. Let's go outside quickly. There's a parade outside. They're all very beautiful cars and cartoon characters. It's a pity not to see them." Only then did the little ones rush out together in a hubbub. The parade outside really didn't disappoint them. Although it was only a dress rehearsal, they knew that the big boss and his children were watching. Every cartoon character was performing very hard. In the long motorcade, in addition to the singing and dancing cartoon characters, there was also Donald Duck's toy car, Officer Rabbit's police car, and carriages with Chinese characteristics. There were many Chinese-themed cars, which were specially designed by Yang Yi so that this fantasy city would contain more Chinese elements. "Little brother, look, it's a little train." Shishi bent down and hugged her little brother amidst the excited cries of her friends. She pointed at the little train with a cartoon head that was slowly approaching not far away. A little train. Little Rusty clapped his little hands happily. He stared at the little train with a longing look on his face. However, the little boy's voice couldn't be heard because the voices of the sisters next to him drowned him out. That's a real sleigh. Lu Xiaoyu was so excited that she jumped up. Chapter 1295. When watching the float parade, there was no need to pay too much attention to the content. It was fine as long as it was lively and lively. The children's thoughts were very simple. At first, they chased after the float happily. Then, under the warm invitation of the cartoon characters, a few of the little girls hesitated, but in the end, they still joined the dance team. Although it was just twisting and turning, the bonfire dance was just a group of people holding hands and spinning around in circles. The children were led by their favorite cartoon characters and danced happily to the beat of the music. Looking at their rosy little faces and happy expressions, it was obvious that they were having fun. Of course, because it was close to noon, the remaining sunlight was very hot. After the parents finished taking pictures, they hurriedly called the children back to a shady place, or they walked up with umbrellas. Do you want to sit on the float? Now is the only chance to sit on it and experience it. It will be more difficult in the future. After the park opens, tourists are not allowed to stand on it. Yang Yi's laughter came from behind. The little girls looked back in surprise and found that Uncle Yang had already brought Lan Xian and Tong Tong onto the small train. Lan Xian happily stuck her head out and waved at her friends. At this moment, Tong Tong was playing the role of the driver. He sat in the cab of the train. Of course, it was not a real cab. In order to make it more realistic, the cab of the real driver was hidden. The little guy was very serious and did not have time to greet his sisters. He was busy turning the loose steering wheel, just like his father driving. At the same time, his red little mouth was trembling as he did his own sound effects. Of course, if he did not spit out saliva and bubbles, this driver would be quite qualified. I want to sit too. The children rushed over like a swarm of bees, their little faces shouting excitedly. But there are no more seats on it. Lan Xian squeezed next to the window of the small train and said awkwardly, "Wasn't that right?" Even Yang Yi had to come down to let Shishi go up to take care of her brother. "I want to sit on the boat at the back." Lu Xiaoyu cheerfully pointed at the flower car at the back and shouted, "Xiaoyu is hungry. I'll go with you, okay?" Lu Weisha tried her best to speak Mandarin. "Of course." Lu Xiaoyu giggled. "Wait for me, I'm going to take that ship too." Shishi stayed by her brother's side for less than 2 seconds. When she heard the commotion outside, she called out briskly and squeezed her way out. Nan Xiaoyu took a fancy to the Chinese-style carriage. He called out, "Who wants to ride in the carriage with me?" However, no one paid any attention to him. Chun Shiyan was calling the last person, Yu Xiaowei, to a float surrounded by musical notes. "All right then, I'll go by myself." Nan Xiaoyu scratched his head and climbed into the large carriage by himself. The float parade did not take long, but the children had a lot of fun. After it was over, in order to avoid the scorching sun, everyone moved to the snow castle that Shishi and the others had been talking about all morning. Everyone walked through the door that was about 4 to 5 meters tall. The scene in front of them made the children cry out excitedly, "Wow! It's so beautiful!" Yu Xiaowei whispered as she looked at the blue in front of her enviously. Wasn't it? Although it was not real ice, it was just a blue-toned wall paint, spaced by hollow blue-tone glass tiles, and diffused light to create the effect of an ice palace. Not only that, but the floor was also covered with snow-colored tiles. Combined with the snowmen, snow treasures, and the winding ice stairs, the hall gave off the feeling of a real ice palace. This is the place where Sister Elsa lived. It's all made of ice. Shishi could not help it. She pulled Lu Weisha and Tong Tong's hands and walked in the middle of the children. She introduced enthusiastically, "Let me tell you, before the spring festival, my brother, parents, and I went to Lu Weisha's hometown to play. We even stayed in a big hotel like this. It's all made of ice. It was so cold at night, and it was also blue like this." Through Cece's introduction, the children seemed to have followed her memories and walked into this wonderful world of ice and snow. At noon, everyone had lunch at a Western restaurant on the 3rd floor of the ice castle called Royal Feast. Just the name alone sounded very domineering. In fact, the decoration of the restaurant was also very domineering. It felt like a palace. Not to mention the independent tables in the side hall for normal visitors. Because of Yang Yi, they were directly seated in the main hall in the middle. The hall was resplendent and had a cathedral-like ceiling with all kinds of patterns. There were huge chandeliers, and although they were fake candles, the dozens of candles still lit up the hall brightly. The long table made of solid wood with red paint was set up in an orthodox Western-style setting. There was a row of chairs with red velvet cushions. It looked very high-end. I feel like we've experienced the feeling of being invited to a dinner party by the Queen of England. Yu Xiaowei's mother Yuing said jokingly. This is all thanks to the 2 bosses. Chun Guoqiang smiled and raised his glass to Yang Yi and Lance Hao Kai. I didn't see the price, but I'm guessing that if you want to enjoy a table like this again after it opens, it'll probably cost more than a few thousand. Right, Boss Lon? Haha, don't worry about that. Let's eat. I think the steak here is pretty good. It's very tender. Lan's Hao Kai laughed and changed the topic. But the cake isn't good. I still like Papa Yang's cake. I also like Sister Ding Xiang's cake. But Sister Ding Xiang is pregnant now, so she didn't make a cake. Lan Xian blinked and started to comment. Lan Xian's mouth was still very picky. Whether it was good or not, she knew the scale in her heart. Yeah. Xian, let's wait for Sister Ding Xiang to give birth. Then we'll go and play with Sister Ding Xiang, okay? She said excitedly. Finally, there's someone younger than my brother. Tong Tong seemed to hear his sister calling him. He lifted his head and looked at his sister, a little confused. However, he realized that his two sisters were in a heated discussion and had no intention of bringing him along. The snow castle would be the tallest building in the whole of Fantasy City. Its height was not only reflected in its appearance, but also in its interior. Every floor had different attractions. For example, Elsa's room when she was young, Anna's room when she was young, Baby Snow's bedroom, and so on. There were also some fantasy rooms that could be viewed using modern technology and 3D glasses. The children were tirelessly exploring room by room, floor by floor. The adults were so tired that they wished they could just take the elevator and wait from the lowest floor to the highest floor. However, when they climbed to the highest floor and walked out of the dark room, they came to the spacious and bright castle balcony. They walked around the balcony with a protective net and looked at the scenery around them. Looking at the gorgeous sunset before sunset, it was as if the afternoon's hard work was worth it. The children were not tall enough. They had to be carried by their fathers to look out over the high stone walls. The other children were fine. Tong Tong was also carried by his mother. However, Yu Xiaowei and Lu Weisha were a little embarrassed. Lu Weisha's father did not come, and Yu Xiaowei also did not have a father. Their mothers could not carry these two large girls who were not light. Come, Uncle Yang will protect you. Yang Yi let Shishi hug his neck and lay on his back. Then he carried Yu Xiaowei in his left hand and Lu Weisha in his right hand, and easily carried them. Ah! Shishi was happy and excited. She screamed and giggled. Ah! Yu Xiaowei whispered shyly and grabbed Uncle Yang's thick arm excitedly. Shishi, your father is so awesome. Lu Weisha also laughed happily and said to Shishi word by word. She had heard the words so awesome from Shishi and Tong Tong countless times. Naturally, she could say it very smoothly. Ehe. When Shishi heard her father being praised, it was as if she was being praised. She was also very proud. Chapter 1296. In fact, in the Ice Snow Kingdom theme park, in addition to the Ice Snow Castle, there were many other attractions for tourists to play. For example, the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs theme roller coaster, the water ride where they rode to the pirate ship to explore, and so on. These were all very fun, but because it was particularly hot today, and it was too exciting and dangerous, Yang Yi didn't arrange for the children to play. It was also a regret. Anyway, it wasn't just once. In the future, there would be opportunities to play a second time, and a third time. However, Shishi and her little friends had a lot of fun today, because in the Ice Snow Castle, there were not only mirror rooms, Bobo Ball Pool, and other rooms for them to explore, but also corresponding ice and snow skip performance hall. The little guys had a lot of fun, and they also feasted their eyes. However, there was no end to the fun. After coming down from the Ice Snow Castle, looking at the gradually darkening sky, the little guys were reluctant to leave. I don't want to go back yet. There are so many fun things to play with, Chen Shuryan shouted, saying the thoughts of all the children. Several children surrounded Shishi. They looked at Yang Yi pitifully, not knowing what the tour guide, Uncle Yang's decision would be. I also want to play, Shishi whispered. She was also worried, but she also looked at her father expectantly. Yang Yi raised the corner of his mouth, waved his hand and laughed. Of course we won't go back so early. There are more fun things in our amusement park tonight. How can we miss it? Let's go eat something. And then play for a night. Suddenly, A surprised expression surged on every child's face, which was illuminated by the setting sun. Wow. I knew it. Uncle Yang is super awesome. Chen Shiyin was wild with joy. She danced with joy, not ladylike at all. I like Uncle Yang so much. Lu Xiaoyu clapped her little hands and giggled. I like it too. Nan Zhaoyu was so happy that the corner of his mouth almost reached his ears. No, because I said I like it first. Lu Xiaoyu said. Then what should we do? Nan Zhaoyu scratched his head. The little Buddhist boy had no intention of arguing. Lu Xiaoyu said to him seriously. You can't say that you like her very much, but you can say that you like her very much. Dinner was also eaten in the park, but compared with the solemn and formal Western restaurant in the castle, the dinner was much more interesting. For example, there was a frozen-themed egg meal. The yellow steamed egg was decorated with snowflakes made of egg white. On the plate, there was a snowflake that looked like ice cream, but it was actually made of eggs and quail eggs. There were also some meat floss sprinkled at the bottom for decoration. There was also a rabbit-themed bento with 2 carrots as ears, making the rabbit look even cuter. Of course, Lan Xian wanted to eat meat. Among the beef ribs she ordered, besides lettuce and small tomatoes, there was also an egg fried in the shape of a Mickey Mouse. Not to mention the taste, looking at the cute image of the food, the little guys liked it very much. Not knowing whether it was because they were hungry from playing or because they were stimulated by the vivid images, the little guys all buried their heads in the food and ate very energetically. But it had to be said that being able to stop to eat and rest, the adults secretly heaved a sigh of relief. I suddenly feel that I'm old. Wu Yu and Murphy said with a wry smile. Even the children can't persevere. They are so tired after walking for a whole day. Wasn't that right? Except for Chen Guoqiang and Yang Yi, who were boxing and fitness trainers, who were still full of energy, the other parents were all frowning and rubbing their calves helplessly. At this moment, the children were still shouting and making noise. Even Shishi and Chen Shiyin couldn't sit still. While standing and eating, they chatted with their friends who were separated by a few adults. Tong Tong also had a lot of fun, and didn't feel tired at all. After Murphy fed him 2 mouthfuls of rice, the little guy twisted his body, and ran to the middle of his sisters to see what they were eating. He chewed the rice in his mouth and made a vague hee-hee sound. But fortunately, the activities at night didn't require them to travel long distances, and climb up and down as during the day. Yang Yi brought everyone to a ride that not only made the children scream in surprise, but also made the adults happy. A merry-go-round. No, in the Ice Kingdom theme park, it had a new change. It was no longer called a merry-go-round, but a carousel reindeer. This was because it was the main character who often pulled the sleigh and led everyone over the mountains in Frozen. The reindeer. In this rotating reindeer area, not only were there reindeer with white to gray hair, but there were also reindeer with brown and red noses that were exclusive to the Christmas sleigh. All kinds of reindeer looked vivid and beautiful under the bright lights. Looking at the dreamy carousel for convenience's sake, it was still called a carousel. In the night, Murphy's eyes couldn't help but become a little dazed. Wow. Murphy couldn't help but stretch out her hands and gently grab Yang Yi's arm, looking at Yang Yi in surprise. But it was a pity, because the children wanted to play more, and it wasn't safe for them to sit on the carousel alone. Yang Yi and Murphy could only take care of one each. Yang Yi took Shishi, and Murphy took Tong Tong to sit on the carousel. Although the carousel in the theme park was much more beautiful than the carousels in other small amusement parks, in such a large space, the children still pulled their parents and asked to sit closer to each other. For a moment in the small space, everyone's laughter were squeezed together, just like boiling hot water. It was very lively. Yang Yi could only ask loudly, "Are you all seated?" The children's childish laughter answered, "Hee, we're all seated." "I haven't sat down yet, wait for me." Lan Xian's loud voice was also very penetrating. Ha ha ha. Amidst the children's laughter, everyone waited for Lan Xian for a while before Yang Yi waved his hand to signal the staff to turn on the carousel. "What now, you're white on the theme tonight?" When the carousel started to turn, in the midst of the children's laughter, a light singing voice suddenly came from the middle of the carousel. There's a song? Of course, this was a musical carousel. Xishi's reaction was the fastest. She turned her head in surprise, looked at her father, and said crisply, "Let it go." "Yes." Yang Yi smiled at the little girl. As the carousel started to turn, the song flowed slowly. When the climax started, Xishi couldn't help but hum softly, let it go, can't it back anymore." When Xishi started to hum, she turned her head in surprise and saw that Yu Xiaowei, who was next to her, was also humming along with her. The two girls looked at each other and smiled. They understood each other's meaning. Then the two of them looked at each other, gently shook their heads, raised their voices a little, and continued to hum together. Hearing Xishi and Yu Xiaowei's humming, Lu Weisha, Lu Xiaoyu, and the other children also joined in the fun. After all, they were already familiar with this song last summer. It was even popular among the children in the country for a period of time. Let it go. In the end, it became a chorus from all the children. Tong Tong leaned into his mother's arms. He didn't want to be left out. He saw that the little guy's face was also full of excitement. He waved his little hand and sang along. Pull the dog hook, pull the dog. Chapter 1297. The merry-go-round was indeed an attractive ride. Once the children got on, they were unwilling to get off. If Yang Yi hadn't told them that there would be a light show later, the children would probably have stayed until the next morning. All right, let's go watch the fireworks. Xishi carefully got off the red-nosed reindeer with her father's help. She had been shouting for the whole day. Even though her parents often reminded her to drink water, the little girl's voice was still a little hoarse. However, why would a child care about her own voice? After the little girl got off the merry-go-round, she couldn't help but shout excitedly to Lan Xian, Yu Xiaowei, and the rest of her friends who were still dawdling. Xianair, Sister Xiaowei, let's hurry up. We want to sit in the best seats to watch the fireworks. Hearing the little girl's hoarse voice, Yang Yi said with a little heartache, all right. Don't worry. No one will fight with us today. Don't worry about not having a good seat. Murphy was infected by the lively atmosphere of the children. She was smiling the whole day and was in a good mood. However, when she held Tong Tong's hand and was about to leave the merry-go-round with Yang Yi, she couldn't help but stop in her tracks. Sigh. Murphy looked at the gigantic merry-go-round that was even more colorful in the night sky. She sighed softly and felt a sense of regret in her heart. However, at this moment, Xishi's giggles could be heard. The little girl saw that her mom didn't follow them, so she waved enthusiastically and shouted with difficulty, "Mom, we're here." Wow. The little girl was worried that her mother would fall behind and lose her way. Xishi had to tell stories to her friends and take care of her unreliable mother. It was very tiring for her. Murphy heard her daughter's hoarse voice and came back to her senses. She smiled and held Tong Tong's hand as they walked up. She said to Xishi, "Sister, you can't talk anymore. How much did you talk today? Look at how hoarse her throat is. Little brother, you should also tell elder sister to stop talking." Little Momo was sitting on the merry-go-round just now, spinning and spinning, and he was a little sleepy. What's more, he didn't have much rest today. With his perseverance and interest, he played with his sisters, so his body was actually very tired. Therefore, when Mo Fei talked to him, the sleepy little Momo was stunned for a while before he raised his head and looked at his mother in confusion. Perhaps because they were really tired, the 9 kids came to the best place to watch the fireworks with their parents. After sitting down on the comfortable benches, they all became quiet. Although they were still whispering, compared to when they had just come down from the castle in the afternoon, they all seemed to have turned from mantis shrimps into obedient babies. However, even though they were tired from playing, Chen Guochang said to Chen Shiyin, "We're going back to the hotel to rest after watching the fireworks. Mom can't even walk." Chen Shiyin was unwilling. She jumped out from between her parents and ran to Xishi's side for a while and said, "Then you guys go back first. I'll continue playing with Xishi." Hee. Xishi bit on the straw of the milk and giggled. At this moment, a clear and sharp whistle suddenly came from the sky. "Baiyu," Yang Yi hurriedly called everyone to look up. "Look, it's starting." They saw a fireball cut across the sky. When it reached the highest point of the snow castle, it suddenly exploded. It was as if thousands of pear trees had bloomed. The blooming fireworks immediately lit up the entire sky. Wow! Not only were the children amazed, but the adults were also amazed. However, this was only the beginning. As if the curtains had been pulled open, more fireworks flew into the sky and exploded. For a moment, the dark night sky seemed to be illuminated by a curtain of light. Moreover, it was constantly changing. One moment, it was a warm and beautiful orange. The next moment, it was a noble and elegant purple. There were also green, orange, and other colors that bloomed from various angles, and in various forms. Not only were Cece, her friends, and her parents in the park able to enjoy this beautiful scenery, but the tourists who chose to stay in the nearby hotels at a high price or shop in the nearby newly opened commercial streets and snack streets also raised their heads in surprise and joy, seeing the iron trees and silver flowers reflected in the distant sky. "There's such a thing?" a tourist muttered to herself. She patted her trouser pocket happily. There were tickets for tomorrow's visit. There should be tickets for tomorrow too. Looks like I'll have to refund the tickets. I'm going to play until nighttime. I'm waiting to see the fireworks up close. Beside her, many people took out their phones and cameras to take pictures of the sky. Some were reporters, and some were ordinary people. However, it didn't matter. Ordinary people also wanted to show off in advance on their WeChat moments. "Look, I'm going to play tomorrow. It looks like there are many surprises." However, in reality, what they saw from afar was far less shocking than what Yang Yi and the children saw up close. Moreover, other than the fireworks, they could also see a light show that couldn't be seen outside the park. There were countless controllable light bulbs on the exterior of the snow castle. Following the rhythm of the fireworks, the snow castle also constantly changed its color. At its most beautiful, the whole castle seemed to be enveloped in purple and white. It was as if the castle was made of inlaid amethysts and diamonds. "Wow! It's so beautiful!" Shishi's eyes were in a daze. She clasped her hands in front of her and subconsciously exclaimed in admiration. It was as if she could become a princess like Sister Elsa, and then live in such a beautiful castle. The little girl looked at the unprecedented scene. Her active thoughts started to spin again. Her imagination ran wild, and her heart was filled with happiness and joy. However, no matter how beautiful the show was, it had to come to an end. Seeing that the fireworks show had passed its most gorgeous peak and gradually began to weaken and come to an end, everyone felt a little unsatisfied. She couldn't help but raise her head. Her big bright eyes looked at her father expectantly. "Papa, let's come and play in the future, okay?" "Okay, as long as you want to come, Papa will accompany you to play." Yang Yi smiled and said, "We can come here infinitely, and then there will be more fun in the future. Like the island opposite, when we finish developing it, we can take a boat or a cable car to go there. There will be more exciting things that you can't imagine." "I want to come too. Papa Yang, I want to come and play with Shishi, okay?" Lan Xian actually heard the conversation between Shishi and Yang Yi from the noise of the fireworks. She ran over and squeezed into Yang Yi's arms. She looked at Shishi and giggled. "Of course, how can we leave our cutest Xian heir behind?" Yang Yi smiled and pinched Lan Xian's little face. Shishi happily snuggled in her father's arms. She counted her little hands and happily said, "Next time, I will bring Bao Bao, Xiao Guai Dudu and Xiao Hui to play together. Then mom, brother, Xian heir Lu Weisha, sister Xiao Wei, Qin Shiyan, and grandpa and grandma, little aunt." The little girl counted her relatives and friends. Suddenly she thought of something and hurriedly added in her slightly hoarse voice, there's more. Uncle Gua, sister Dingxiang and their baby. When the baby grows up, we will bring the baby to play together." As Yang Yi listened, he rubbed Cece's little head even more lovingly. "That's a must. We have to call everyone. Everyone will be happy together." Hee. Shishi happily acted coquettishly in her father's arms. She even contentedly twisted her little butt on the bench. "The book is over." "Of course not. Being mischievous makes me very happy, author." When they returned to the hotel at night, Tong Tong was so sleepy that he fell asleep in his father's arms. Shishi was the same. After taking a shower, she tiredly lay on the bed and played the role of a chicken pecking rice. After dozing off for a while, she also fell asleep before her mother could wipe Tong Tong's body. I'm also sleepy. I'm so tired today. Murphy covered the two little guys who were sleeping soundly with their blankets. She lay on the bed pitifully and looked at Yang Yi. She was so tired. She needed her husband to comfort her. However, Yang Yi mysteriously smiled. You can't rest yet. I still have a surprise for you. Quick, get up and change into your clothes. We'll be back soon. Ah. We still have to go out? Murphy pouted and rolled on the bed unwillingly. She was still unwilling to get up. In the end, she still wanted Yang Yi to hug and kiss her before she lazily got up. Where are we going? Murphy asked curiously as she sat in Yang Yi's car. However, Yang Yi did not say. He kept smiling mysteriously. This made Murphy feel as if there were 100 claws scratching her heart. She was so angry that her teeth itched. However, the buildings in front of them were becoming more and more familiar. Even Murphy, who had no sense of direction, recognized them. She asked in surprise, "Isn't this the way to the amusement park?" Of course, they were going to the amusement park. Yang Yi had already arranged everything. When his car arrived, the staff opened the door for him. Yang Yi drove the car directly to the merry-go-round attraction. The lights in the snow castle were already off. The other attractions were also off. The entire amusement park was dark. They were only waiting for tomorrow's trial opening. However, the merry-go-round was like a scene in a movie. It was the only place with lights on in the dark. However, it was bright and dazzling like the Milky Way. Now, how could Murphy not understand what Yang Yi wanted to do? She looked at Yang Yi, who had just stopped the car, with a face full of surprise. Her soft heart was filled with happiness and joy at this moment. Yang Yi walked over and opened the car door on Murphy's side. He struck a very gentlemanly pose and said with a smile, "My queen, please get out of the car. We are going to ride the merry-go-round." Wasn't there a saying? If she was inexperienced in the world, take her to see all the prosperity of the world. If her heart was full of vicissitudes, take her to ride the merry-go-round. Although Mo Fei's heart had not experienced the vicissitudes of life, and sometimes she was as silly as a child, Yang Yi still knew that in the past 6 months, Mo Fei still had a little burden in her heart. Yang Yi just wanted her to be as happy as a child and forget those unpleasant things. Sure enough, as Yang Yi expected, Murphy was reserved for a moment. She smiled and reached out her hand for Yang Yi to hold before getting out of the car. Don't the staff need to rest? Aren't we disturbing them too much like this? Murphy and Yang Yi walked hand in hand into the ticket gate of the merry-go-round amusement area, and couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "It's okay. We've already agreed." Yang Yi comforted her. After entering the merry-go-round, Murphy's smile became brighter. Her white teeth and charming smiling eyes were full of joy and her love for Yang Yi. Yang Yi helped her onto the reindeer. Murphy couldn't wait for Yang Yi to sit on it, and put one hand around her waist. This gave her a sense of security. "Tonight, I want to ride the merry-go-round with you like this." Murphy grabbed the pillar with both hands, leaned back and snuggled into Yang Yi's arms. She said happily, "It's just that Shishi and Chunchen made it impossible for us to leave. So now is the best time," Yang Yi said with a smile. He snapped his fingers at the staff outside. Finally, the merry-go-round began to turn. Murphy was just about to wave her hands and cheer happily like Shishi and the other girls did tonight. However, the music in her ears suddenly made Murphy stunned. There's a song? And it's not the "Let It Go" that I'm tired of listening to tonight. Just as the merry-go-round was turning and the melody was changing, Yang Yi gently hummed in her ears along with the rhythm. Face to face, sit on the merry-go-round, listen to the music, talk about wishes. That's right. Yang Yi had changed the lyrics of a very good song. The most romantic thing, to match the current situation. However, as he hummed gently and his soft breath entered her ears, Murphy couldn't help but feel her body go limp. An indescribable romantic feeling began to fill her heart. "You want me to be gentler and gentler. I want you to keep me in your heart." Listening to the lyrics that Yang Yi sang, Murphy suddenly had an inexplicable feeling. It was as if she had returned to the time when her relationship with Yang Yi began to ease. Wasn't that right? At that time, Yang Yi was very fierce. Murphy felt wronged every time she saw him. Naturally, she also treated him coldly. However, in her heart, Murphy also hoped that Yang-yi could be gentler. Fortunately, she didn't miss out. Yang-yi really became gentler and gentler, opening her frozen heart. Thinking about it this way, perhaps, the Yang-yi at that time was just like what he sang in the lyrics, hoping that she would keep him in her heart. Sorry, hubby. I was always cold to you in the past. Murphy couldn't help but grab Yang-yi's hand that was wrapped around her lower abdomen. She said apologetically. However, Yang-yi paused. He pulled out his hand and pressed his index finger on Murphy's lips, not allowing her to apologize. He continued to sing softly. The most romantic thing I can think of is to slowly grow old with you. Along the way, I'll collect bits and pieces of laughter. In the future, sitting in a rocking chair, we'll slowly chat. Murphy was touched by the lyrics. She sat on the merry-go-round and gently opened her arms, allowing herself to completely snuggle into Yang-yi's embrace. The sadness and emotions just now all flowed into crystal-clear tears. They all flowed into the happy smile at the corner of her mouth. As the merry-go-round spun, it was as if they were also waving in the night wind. When the waves of happiness receded from her mind, giving Murphy some space to think, Murphy heard Yang-yi singing the last part of the song. The most romantic thing I can think of is to slowly grow old with you. Until we're too old to go anywhere, I'll still treat you as the treasure in my hand. She happily laid in Yang-yi's embrace for a while before mischievously turning her head. She giggled at the person she loved the most and said, No, I can't grow old so quickly. I still want to come here to play in the future. Next time, we have to do this secretly. Of course. Yang-yi smiled and reached out to scratch the bridge of her nose. The two hugged each other, and happily sat on the merry-go-round for a while. However, after the happiness gradually passed, their thoughts returned to reality. Hubby, do you think it's a little bad for us to leave the children in the hotel and come out alone? Murphy asked a little worriedly. It does seem a little bad. Yang-yi scratched his head. He also wanted to give Murphy a romantic expression. He didn't think too much about it. They looked at each other and smiled, then quickly jumped off the merry-go-round. Murphy held Yang-yi's hand, and with a bell-like laughter, the two of them started to run outside like children. We can't stay here for too long. Quick, let's go back and see the children. End of book. Chapter 1298. Introduction 1. Shishi is not yet 4 years old. She has just moved to the coffee shop near the school with her father. She hasn't told Murphy. This is a story between Chapter 21 and Chapter 23. In fact, before Shishi came, Yang-yi had already cleaned up the accommodation in the coffee shop. He had also bought the necessities. It could be said that he was ready to move in. Therefore, after moving in with Shishi today, Yang-yi only needed to tidy up the clothes he brought, some of the items he needed to collect, and some of Shishi's necessities. While her father was folding the clothes, Shishi didn't stay idle. The little girl first moved close to her father and watched him fold the clothes, but soon, she felt a little bored. How could her father keep folding clothes? The little girl went to the side of the big bed in the bedroom. She grabbed the mattress with her 2 small hands, and then propped herself up with her small belly. Her 2 thin legs kicked in the air. Before Yang-yi could think of giving her a push, Shishi twisted her waist and moved sideways onto the bed. She put her feet on the bed with difficulty, and then turned over on the bed. The little girl's belly was facing up. She arched her head and neck and kicked her 2 feet. Like an earthworm, she moved to the front of her father. Because of this, the little girl's bangs that her father had combed were messed up. But it didn't matter. Shishi opened her big eyes and looked at her father, who was upside down from her angle, and giggled. Yang-yi's originally closed lips couldn't help but curve up at the little girl's cute appearance. He smiled gently and reached out to rub Shishi's forehead. Papa! Shishi called out clearly. Yang-yi responded. Shishi just giggled and didn't say anything for a long time. Perhaps feeling that her father was paying attention to the stack of clothes again, Shishi laughed for a while, turned over, and looked at her father muttering, Papa, what are you doing? Although he knew that Shishi was asking the obvious, Yang Yi still patiently said, "Daddy is folding clothes." Shishi lay on the bed. After waiting for a while, she couldn't help but ask, "Papa is folding clothes? Why are you folding clothes?" Yang Yi continued to answer gently, "Because the clothes were wrinkled, Dad had to fold them again so that they wouldn't look bad in the wardrobe." Shishi, who was not even 4 years old, had a lot of information to say. The little girl opened her mouth slightly and stared at her father's skillful movements. Of course, Shishi didn't need to continue to stand on tiptoe to attract her father's attention. Yang Yi had already quickly finished packing the clothes. "Shishi, what do you want to eat for lunch?" Yang Yi looked at the little girl who was rolling around on the bed and smiled. "Today we moved to a bigger house and a bigger kitchen. What do you want to eat? Dad will make it for you." Perhaps because she felt her father's attention, Cece happily turned over and got up from the bed. She jumped on the soft bed, blinked her big eyes, and said to her father, "What do you want to eat?" "Yes, what do you want to eat? Tell Dad." Yang Yi stretched out his hand to tidy up Shishi's messy hair. Although he didn't know how to tie hair, he still learned how to untie Shishi's hairband and put it back on Yang Yi's hair. Shishi turned around obediently, but she was a little impatient. She stood there, shaking her little butt as if she was dancing. With her back to her father, she giggled and said, "I want to eat French fries." French fries? Yang Yi was a little surprised. He didn't expect Shishi to want to eat these. But thinking about it carefully, Yang Yi didn't have the answer to the hypothetical question. What would Shishi want to eat? In his memory, he knew too little about his daughter. Shishi's back was to her father. She seemed to be a little worried that her father didn't know, so she couldn't help but turn around and gesture with her little hands. "Yes, yes, French fries. This is so yummy." The little girl used her little fingers, which were about the size of French fries, to gesture and even made a gesture of dipping them in ketchup for her father. Although the little girl didn't have a lot of vocabulary, and it was a little difficult to explain, Yang Yi couldn't help but laugh when he saw her pouting her red little lips and blinking her big bright eyes. He wanted to reach out and pinch the little girl's pink cheeks. "Okay, Dad will fry French fries for you." After tying up Cece's hair, Yang Yi slapped his palm downwards, holding the little girl's little butt and lifting her up high. "Ha ha ha ha." Shishi grabbed her father's shoulders with both hands, and her bell-like laughter resounded throughout the house. Although Shishi said that she liked French fries weren't healthy food and didn't have enough nutrition. So Yang Yi rummaged through the ingredients in the fridge. In the end, other than French fries, he also fried a salmon tail, a large piece of steak, and a large plate of vegetable and fruit salad. This meal tasted a little like Western food, but to Yang Yi, his food didn't care whether it was Chinese or Western food. As long as it was delicious, it was delicious. When Yang Yi brought the last fried salmon tail to the dining table, he saw that Shishi had already climbed onto the chair by herself. Her 2 knees pressed against her skirt as she knelt on the cushioned chair. She reached out to grab the still slightly hot French fries on the plate. After hearing the movement, Shishi turned around and saw her father looking at her. The little girl hurriedly retracted her hands. She was very embarrassed as she wiped her 2 little hands on her body and laughed at her father. "Ee-hee-hee. You have to wash your hands. Don't wipe your hands on your body," Yang Yi said gently. He put the 2 plates on the table and laughed. "You didn't even wait for the ketchup before you started eating?" The little girl's 2 little hands grabbed the edge of the table, and she even shrank her head. Only her head above her nose was exposed on the table. She looked at her father and continued to smile. Yang Yi waved at her. The little girl was indifferent. She was still peeking at her father and laughing. "Go wash your hands. You can only eat after you wash your hands," Yang Yi had to say. Hee, Mom said the same thing. The little girl ran in front of her father, raised her head, and looked at her father with a smile of exultation. When it was time to eat, she couldn't sit still. When she was eating happily, she even stepped on the chair and ate the French fries in various positions. Looking at the way she twisted her body, it felt like the little girl was dancing for her father. Yang Yi felt that Shishi's behavior was not very ladylike. However, he hadn't thoroughly studied the education books that he bought not long ago. He wasn't sure if he should correct Shishi's behavior, so he chose to hold back for the time being. Not only did he hold back, but Yang Yi also stepped on Shishi's chair with his right foot to prevent the little girl from losing her balance and falling back. Eat some fish, Yang Yi said softly. He picked up the communal chopsticks and picked up a piece of fried salmon from the thickest part of the fish tail. He said to Shishi, "The salmon that Dad made is delicious." But I'm eating French fries." Shishi was still holding a French fry in her right hand. She leaned on her father's arm and gestured to him while trying to put the fry into her mouth. However, she quickly reacted and chuckled. I forgot about the ketchup." The little girl quickly turned around and pressed half of her body on the table. She dipped her head in the ketchup before putting it into her mouth. "You can eat French fries, but you also have to eat some fish and vegetables, right? Because if you only eat French fries, the nutrition won't keep up. Those tall and big brothers and sisters need to eat a lot to grow up quickly." Yang Yi patiently reasoned with Shishi. "When you were in the car yesterday, didn't you tell Dad that you wanted to grow up quickly and then sit in the front?" "I want to sit in the front." Shishi nodded seriously and said to her father. "Then you have to eat fish and vegetables." Yang Yi smiled and said, "Okay." Shishi was obedient this time. She hugged her father's hand and sat down on the chair so that she could eat the fish that her father fed her. The little girl's little mouth was eating happily. Soon, her eyes lit up and she looked at her father in surprise. "Is it delicious?" Yang Yi looked at her and couldn't help but feel happy. The corner of his mouth curled up and he asked with a smile that he didn't notice. Cece's two little hands waved up and down, as if expressing the endless joy in her heart. She raised her little head, and her eyes curved into crescents as she said to her father, He, super delicious." Unfortunately, the little girl didn't know how to describe her feelings. She couldn't describe the crispy skin and tender meat. But what did it matter? The little girl had already used her body language and her happy expression to give her father a big thumbs up. "Then eat more. Also eat some vegetables." Yang Yi picked up food for the little girl. When her mouth was full, he took the opportunity to cut his steak and put a piece into his mouth to chew. "Well, it's a bit too cooked. But this beef still needs to be cooked well. The food market is not assured." Yang Yi evaluated himself and inadvertently turned his head. He saw a pair of bright eyes staring at him. Those pure eyes had an indescribable penetrating power that directly penetrated Yang Yi's heart. Oh! Yang Yi's forehead was covered with a drop of cold sweat. He inexplicably felt a little ashamed and said, "Shishi, do you want to eat more fish?" The little girl also came back to her senses and sweetly called out, "Papa." Shishi excitedly held her father's hand and stepped on her father's thigh from the chair. Her small body leaned back and nestled in her father's wide arms. Her small hand pointed at the large piece of beef on her father's plate and said softly, "Papa, Shishi also wants to eat." Yes, how could he eat alone? Shishi felt that her father was eating very happily. Yang Yi carried Shishi back to her chair and said, "Okay, but you have to wait. Papa will cut a smaller piece for you. You can't eat such a big piece. It's better to cut it smaller." Shishi curiously looked at her father's movements. Although she didn't understand clearly, she still believed in her father and didn't argue. Yang Yi cut a piece of beef for her and gave it to her with chopsticks. The little girl sat on the side and chewed with relish. "You have to chew it thoroughly before you can eat it," Yang Yi worriedly warned. She was very happy to eat with her father, but unfortunately, Cece was still too small and couldn't eat too much. She quickly ate until her little belly was bulging. Then she sat on the chair and giggled as she looked at her father, who was still eating in big mouthfuls of meat. "I'm full." The little girl looked for a while and saw that her father wasn't looking at her. She touched her small belly and said to her father with a smile. Yang Yi turned his head and smiled at her. "Papa, look at me." The little girl looked at her small belly and motioned for her father to touch her bulging belly. Not bad, you are indeed full. Later, Papa will take you to the school for a walk. The school is also very beautiful," Yang Yi said softly. "Okay." Shishi happily waved her two small hands and then pressed them in front of her body. She looked up at her father and smiled sweetly. She was very happy to be with Papa. She could always play with Papa and eat delicious food with Papa. Papa is very delicious. She thought happily in her heart. She didn't feel that there was anything wrong with her words. Anyway, she just thought in her heart and no one heard it. I have to tell Mom tonight. Chapter 1299. Today, because they had to move from the village in the city of Wuhu district, they had lunch a little late. When Yang Yi finished cleaning up the dishes, it was almost time for lunch. However, she was in high spirits. She was thinking about what her father had said about going to school. When her father was cleaning up the dishes, she ran around the house and had no intention of sleeping at all. The sliding door of the kitchen was gently opened with a crash. A cute little head came in, blinked her big eyes, and asked sweetly, "Papa, are we going shopping?" "Yes, but we're not going shopping, we're going to visit the school." Yang Yi laughed. He wiped his hands and spread the cloth flat. "Are you going to visit the school?" Cece muttered as she followed her father out. "Yes, we live next to the school. Let's go, put on your shoes. We will go for a walk to digest our food. We will come back for a nap later." Yang Yi gently patted the little girl's head and said softly. She ran to the front actively and said happily, "I can put on my shoes by myself. I don't need Papa to put them on for me." Yang Yi looked at the little girl sitting on the stool in front of the stairs and trying to put on her shoes. She was quite smart. Her every move revealed dexterity. She put on her beautiful little sandals correctly on her left and right feet and pressed the Velcro with her little hands. "Hee Papa, look." After the little girl put on her shoes, she jumped on the floor. Then, as if she was asking for praise, she stretched out her feet for her father to see. She looked up at her father with her big eyes full of expectation. Yang Yi understood Shishi's expectation. He praised her a little clumsily. "Not bad, not bad. You are wearing beautiful clothes." But what did it matter? Even if there were no fancy words, she was satisfied to hear her father's praise. She turned around, shook her head, and smiled happily. Jiangqing Media University was located at the foot of Tingshan Mountain and was next to the Grand Canal. Naturally, the scenery of the campus was impeccable. Yang Yi led Shishi along the school path. The trees on both sides of the path were verdant and tall. The tall and sturdy tree trunks seemed to reach into the clouds. The green area of the campus was very wide. Not to mention the lush and dense leaves, not to mention the verdant grass. Even the outer walls of the buildings were covered with many vine leaves that would sway in the breeze. It was as if the whole campus was shrouded in a wonderful sea of trees. Occasionally, dark green waves would bring a cool breeze to this hot afternoon. Of course, no matter how beautiful the campus scenery was, it couldn't be compared to the beautiful little scenery in front of Yang Yi. 1, 2, 3, 4. The little girl counted the number of steps in her soft and cute voice as she walked unsteadily on the road. Perhaps it was because she was happy to be out with her father, but she was more mischievous than usual. Instead of walking on the spacious and flat school path, she had to walk on this challenging road for her father to see. If it was another parent, or if it was the stricter Mo Fei, Cece might have been scolded and then walked down the stairs unhappily. After all, the road was too narrow, and a child's sense of balance was relatively average. If she wasn't careful, she might fall and even knock her teeth out. However, Yang Yi didn't stop her. He didn't think that this little risk was anything to do with it. After all, in his previous life, when he was Shishi's age, he was already struggling in the dangerous jungle. Therefore, even though he knew that Shishi might fall, he was still willing to let Shishi play because he would be carefully protecting her from behind. Yang Yi reached out his hand, ready to pull the little girl up at any time. However, to his relief, although Shishi was unsteady, she didn't fall and barely managed to maintain her balance. However, the little girl started to get nervous towards the end, and her counting started to mess up. 12, 13, 17, 10, 10. Yang Yi saw that the little girl was stuttering as she walked forward. He couldn't help but smile and say, 12, 13, the next one is 14. Why is it 17? Shishi followed her father's words and continued to count. 15, 17. Shishi skipped another number, and Yang Yi suddenly felt a little unnatural. He simply led Shishi in counting. 15, 16, 17. With her father's voice, Shishi read more energetically. The little girl walked in front, and her steps and tone were very strong. She even wanted to show off in front of her father, and tried hard to say the numbers before her father opened his mouth. After playing like this for a while, Shishi jumped down from the curb by herself. The little girl turned around and looked at her father with her big watery eyes. Soon, the little girl's smile became wider, and the corners of her eyes curved slightly like crescent moons. She giggled and said, "Papa, you should do the same thing as me." Shishi excitedly took her father's hand and gestured, wanting her father to walk on the curb with her, instead of walking on the side of the road. Yang wouldn't refuse. He smiled and walked steadily on the curb. "Papa, you have to follow me." Shishi saw that her father could walk very well without her teaching him. She smiled with satisfaction, turned her head, and gently swung her little ponytail. She ran in front of her father, stood on the curb, and strode forward. "Slow down, don't rush." Yang was worried that Shishi would miss a step, so he hurriedly advised her in a soft voice. Shishi misunderstood. She was very kind and said in a soft voice, "Okay then. I'll wait for Papa." Although it was already lunchtime and Jiangchuan's campus was a lot quieter, there were still some students walking around the campus. Yang took Shishi for a walk on the campus. The little girl laughed happily, and her sweet laughter attracted a lot of people's attention. Yang took Shishi to a flower bed. The little girl's cute and delicate face, pink and pretty little skirt, and the blooming flowers were shining brightly. Yang keenly noticed that behind them, a girl wearing black bloomers, a white short t-shirt, and a small round hat like an artist, secretly picked up the SLR camera she had been holding. This girl originally came to take pictures of the scenery, but now she probably felt that Shishi and the flowers in the flower bed formed a very beautiful composition. So she picked up the camera and wanted to take a picture. Yang noticed before she took action. Now he frowned slightly and hesitated. She wants to secretly take a picture of Shishi? Although he knew that the girl probably didn't have any bad intentions, Yang didn't want someone to take a picture of him. In his previous life, if he was photographed, it meant that trouble would come knocking on his door very quickly. However, when Yang turned slightly and was about to stop her, he hesitated again. "You are no longer an assassin who is tired of running for his life. You are now an ordinary person. An ordinary person who needs to integrate into society." Yang silently warned himself in his heart. Would an ordinary person care about other people's camera? Yang thought about it from the perspective of an ordinary person. Maybe I would care, but I wouldn't show it too much. After all, it's just a picture, not a gun to my forehead. As Yang hesitated, the girl snapped a picture of Shishi. Should I go up and ask her to delete the picture? Yang frowned. However, Yang still hoped that he could integrate into the world of ordinary people and live a peaceful life like an ordinary person. Let's not react so violently. She is just a student. Taking a picture won't affect us much. Yang secretly weighed the pros and cons. He felt that if he went to negotiate with others, it wouldn't affect his image. Moreover, he might leave an impression on Shishi that he was a fierce father. Yang didn't make a move, but at this time, Shishi noticed the girl's action. After all, there were only the three of them in the vicinity of the flower bed. When the girl saw that the girl was pointing a camera at her, she was a little embarrassed. Perhaps it wasn't because of the camera, but Shishi was still very afraid of socializing. She was used to being alone. She ran back to her father's side and hugged her father's leg with her two little hands. She hid her head behind her father's, but only peeked out a little to sneak a peek at the young lady with one eye. "What's the matter?" Yang patted the girl's head and asked softly. Shishi found a sense of security by her father's side. The girl raised her small head and explained to her father in a low voice, There, someone is looking at me." Yang turned his head and saw that the girl who was secretly taking pictures saw that she was discovered. She bowed to Yang embarrassedly, blushed, and ran away shyly. Yang smiled and explained to Shishi, "It's okay. That girl saw that you were so pretty, so she took a picture of you." This was also the explanation that he found for himself. When the girl saw that the outsider had left, she secretly breathed a sigh of relief. She looked at her father and didn't say anything. She just stood there and smiled. She was really a shy little girl. Chapter 1300. Mo Fei was actually very relieved to send Cici to Yang Yi's place. After all, Yang Yi's love for his daughter was indescribable. After the little girl came back from her father's house last time, she even said a lot of good things about her father to Mo Fei. Murphy finished a day's work and dragged her tired body back at night. She lay on the sofa in a daze, wondering if she should call Yang Yi to check on Xishi's situation. On one hand, she missed her daughter and wanted to know if the little girl was having fun. On the other hand, Murphy didn't want to talk to Yang Yi. That bastard. Murphy couldn't help but grit her teeth when she thought of how Yang Yi had talked back to her yesterday. It wasn't entirely Yang Yi's fault. Murphy later reflected on herself. She had given Yang Yi money without thinking, and it was easy for Yang Yi to feel disgusted. Murphy knew that Yang Yi had a strong sense of self-esteem. Otherwise, he wouldn't have kept rejecting her financial aid and stay in that dirty and smelly rental house. Thinking of this, Murphy thought of the scene she saw yesterday. For example, Yang Yi's house was clean and tidy, and Yang Yi's house smelled good as if it had been sprayed with air freshener. And Yang Yi's bulging muscles after taking a shower. Murphy's face suddenly turned red when she thought of this. She spat and shook her head hurriedly, throwing the charming scene to the back of her mind. But you shouldn't be so reckless. Can't you give in to a woman a little? I'm giving you money in hopes that you can live a better life. It's not like. Murphy knew that her way of doing things was a little inappropriate, and her words were stiff, but she couldn't help but complain in her heart. After thinking for a long time, Murphy decided to let go of the resentment in her heart. She took out her phone and called Yang Yi. Beep beep. While waiting, Murphy suddenly felt a little flustered, and her heart pounded. However, the wait was a little long, so long that Murphy wondered if she had dialed the wrong number. She put away her panic and looked at the phone in front of her to see the number. That's right. Why isn't he picking up the phone? Murphy thought that she couldn't get through, but at the last few rings, she suddenly saw the phone screen flash. It was connected. Murphy hurriedly picked up the phone. Her heart was flustered, and she didn't know what to say. However, she heard Xi's voice. Hello, I'm Xi. Are you Mom? Is it Xi? Murphy breathed a sigh of relief, and her heart calmed down a little. She cleared her throat and said, Ahem, Xi, it's Mom. The little girl's giggles immediately came from the phone. Xi happily called Mom, and then she couldn't wait to say, Mom, let me tell you, Papa's phone rang, and I was shocked. Then I saw that it was Mom's phone. It was not strange that Xi could recognize it. Last time, she used her father's phone to call her mother. Listening to the little girl's dependence, Murphy's mood improved a lot. The physical and mental tiredness brought by the work she had to do since the early morning seemed to be driven away by Xishi's laughter. Are you having fun at Papa's house? Murphy asked softly. Yes. Xishi's laughter came over. She had already answered her mother's question clearly, but she still wanted to talk to her mother. Today Papa and I moved. Mom, don't you think it's super cool? Murphy's eyes widened in surprise, and she quickly asked, Moved? Why did you move? Where did you move to? Because Papa said we were moving. She still couldn't understand her mother's many questions. She tilted her little head in confusion and said according to her own thoughts, Mom, let me tell you, Papa and I are living in a big house. It's bigger than Mom's house, super big. And I like it very much. When Xi was describing, Murphy's mind was in a mess, and she fell into a terrible association. Where did Yang Yi take Xi? You won't take Xi away and not return Xi to me, right? Why didn't he tell me that he was moving? Why didn't he call me all day? Although Murphy didn't want to believe that Yang Yi was such a person, Murphy faintly felt that the Yang Yi she met these 2 times seemed to have changed a little. However, Murphy's mind was in a mess at the moment, and she seemed to have forgotten that Yang Yi was not the kind of person who would take the initiative to report to her. Yang Yi had never taken the initiative to call Murphy, and now Yang Yi had no intention of telling Murphy about his own affairs. How could he communicate with Murphy about moving? Mom, Papa has a super big bed here. I want to sleep with Papa and Mom. Shishi was tired of standing and talking on the phone, so she simply took the phone that she had tiptoed to the table and climbed onto the soft big bed. She put the phone on the bed, threw herself on the quilt, and giggled to her mother. Murphy was a little absent-minded. She was still thinking about how to ask Shishi and get the address of Yang Yi's new residence from Shishi. But at this time Yang Yi, who had finished bathing for Shishi, came back. He heard the movement in the bedroom, so he walked over and looked at Shishi. Shishi, who are you talking to on the phone? Papa. Shishi saw her father and screamed happily. The little girl felt that her mother and father were there. So she was so excited that she could no longer sit still. She climbed up and jumped on the bed with her white and tender little feet. She pointed at the phone that was still on the bed, and was tossing and turning because of her jumping. She said enthusiastically, "Papa, I'm talking to Mom on the phone." When Yang Yi heard that Shishi was talking to Murphy on the phone, he hesitated for a moment. He felt that he shouldn't pretend to be cold, so he walked over and picked up the phone. Under Shishi's expectant gaze, he started talking to Murphy. "Well, it's me." Yang Yi's voice was very low. "I moved to the school, Jiang City Media University. Because I rented a shop, I can open a coffee shop downstairs." Perhaps because Shishi was looking at him, Yang Yi actually calmed down and calmly explained to Murphy, who was questioning him. On the other side of the phone, Murphy was originally full of anger. But when she heard Yang Yi's calm explanation, and his tone wasn't hard and uncomfortable, Murphy was stunned. When she wanted to get angry again, she found that her anger had disappeared without her knowing. When she talked to Yang Yi, her voice was still very cold, but her tone was much gentler. "Then, tell me the address, and I'll go over to take a look tomorrow." "Why didn't you tell me?" Murphy unconsciously said the last sentence in a slightly reproachful tone. Of course, it wasn't very obvious, and Murphy herself didn't notice it. "Okay, I'll write it to you in a text message after I hang up," Yang Yi replied straightforwardly. Murphy's hanging heart finally relaxed by half. But Shishi, who was next to her, didn't let it go. She jumped on the bed, her two little hands still holding onto her father's big hands. She shouted anxiously, No, don't hang up. I still want to talk to Mom." The little girl's soft and cute voice still diluted a lot of the barrier between Yang Yi and Murphy. Yang Yi said a few words to Murphy, then passed the phone to Shishi. Shishi still had a lot to say to her mother, because she went to the school to play today. There were a lot of new things that she wanted to share with her mother. The next day, Murphy finished her work early. According to the address given by Yang Yi, she asked the driver to send her to the north gate of Jiang City Media University. Before she left, Murphy didn't hold back. She called Yang Yi early. So, before she got out of the car, she saw Yang Yi standing by the roadside waiting for her. Shorts, t-shirt and flip-flops, Yang Yi was wearing sneakers. This guy was dressed so casually. The taxi driver didn't recognize Murphy, but he glanced at the beautiful and arrogant Murphy, who was wearing a dark blue, sparkling, and knee-length slim-fit dress with light-colored sunglasses. Then he looked at Yang Yi with an expression of disbelief. It was as if a fresh flower was stuck in cow dung. Ignoring the taxi driver, Murphy was actually a little unhappy when she saw Yang Yi's nonchalant look. But she didn't care too much. After she walked to Yang Yi's side, Murphy snorted softly. "Let's go," Yang Yi said calmly to Murphy with a wooden face. Shishi was still waiting at home. Yang Yi was still worried. Of course, before they went upstairs, Yang Yi still gave a simple introduction to Murphy. "The coffee shop is downstairs. It hasn't been renovated yet. Upstairs is the living quarters." Murphy pursed her lips. Seeing that Yang Yi had changed his living quarters, although she didn't see what it was like inside, she was still a little happy. After all, the place where Yang Yi used to live was too messy and narrow. But Murphy's happy mood turned into a few muffled mumbles. "It's too secluded. What kind of place did he choose?" The atmosphere between the two was a little awkward. Luckily, when they went upstairs, Shishi's happy laughter swept away the awkwardness. The little girl happily jumped into her mother's arms. "Mama, did you miss me?" They hadn't seen each other for 2 days, and she was doted on by her father in every possible way. Shishi sweetly acted coquettishly in her mother's arms. Murphy actually wanted to tease her daughter, but now that Yang Yi was looking at her from behind, she was a little embarrassed. She also wanted to maintain the image of a strong woman in front of Yang Yi, so she coughed twice and let Shishi stand back on the ground. Okay. I missed you, but you have to be good. I'm very good. Shishi tilted her little head and looked at her mother's expression. Then she giggled. Shishi couldn't wait to take her mother to see her father's big house. Because she had introduced it to her mother yesterday, her father's big house was much bigger than her mother's. After going through a few rooms, the little girl ran back to the master bedroom. She passed by the bed and grabbed the railing of the balcony with her 2 little hands. She called out in a crisp voice, "Mama Kiki, come quickly. Here, there are so many flowers." When Murphy passed by the big bed in the master bedroom, and was about to go to the balcony to look at the scenery outside the small building with Shishi, her eyes couldn't help but linger on the big bed that could be said to be a little wide. Papa has a super big bed here. I want to sleep with Papa and Mom. Shishi's soft voice on the phone yesterday seemed to echo in Murphy's ears again. Sleep together. Thinking of this, Murphy's white face suddenly turned red. Bad intentions. Murphy shyly scolded Yang Yi in her heart. She didn't know that in the future, this big bed not only didn't become the main battlefield of bad intentions, but because this big bed was occupied by Shishi, the whole family left this room. She and Yang Yi were ahem, of course. This was a story for another day. Achoo. In the living room, Yang Yi, who was putting Murphy's shoes on the shoe rack and hanging up Murphy's small suit, suddenly sneezed. Yang Yi raised his head, a little confused. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.